All right, we're going to call to order the meeting today, Wednesday, September 17th, 2014, West Dakota Water Development District meeting. We'll start off with roll call of members.
Foster Sawyer.
Here.
Dan Richer.
Here.
Orland Paulson. Laverne Cook.
Here.
Robert Akers.
Here.
Tim Rogers.
Here.
Chuck Jasper. Sandra Bashara.
Here.
Steve Hasenorl.
Here.
And Chuck is going to be late.
Okay. All right. Approval of the agenda. We did have one change. We advertised that the budget hearing would be at 2:10. So if that's okay with everybody, we're going to try to run through, put that in at 2:10 before the North Water, or before the 319 discussion. Hopefully that won't take long and move past that. I was wondering if I could get a
motion to approve the change.
Second.
all right, all in favor?
All right.
Any discussion? Does that pose any problems for anybody in the audience? As we had it changed, all right.
Steve moved and who seconded?
Dan? All approved. All right, we'll move on to are there any other changes on the agenda anybody would like to discuss or talk about? All right, we'll move past that. Minutes of the previous meeting. Looking for a motion to approve. Do we have any discussion on that?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes?
Well, I think they're a little lengthy. But, at least we have voted twice now, motions, resolutions and payment of bills. I don't have a problem with the information per se, but can it be attached to the back of it until we can make a decision on what we're going to do?
But you guys have approved policy to have the minutes reflect more of the institutional knowledge. So this board has acted on that. It's reflected in the policies that were adopted in May.
Yeah.
Let's bring that up in directors' discussions, and we'll discuss that further at that time. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, minutes passed, and we'll bring that up in discussion at items from directors.
Everybody approved the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now we're going to move on to the budget.
Bill, administrative items. You have to wait till 2:10 for the
Okay.
budget.
Okay.
You have to wait till 2:10.
Oh, so you don't want to cover administrative items?
Yep, keep going down
All right.
the agenda until 2:10, and we'll just kind of hang out and have tea till then. Payment of bills.
Payment of bills, yep. Do you want to cover that?
Oh, they are right there for you, and
Get a motion to approve payment of bills?
Make a motion to pay bills.
Got a motion?
I'll second that.
Second by Bob. Open for discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
All in favor except one. The payment of bills passes.
okay. We
We're
have
at
4
2:07.
minutes.
Okay. have, Denise, you'd like to talk about?
Actually, I will bring up one thing that we can talk about. It's next year's meeting schedule. I think it's towards the back of your packet. I would like to propose that we have our budget hearing in August. So what we would do is we'd have a January meeting, a March meeting, a May meeting, a July meeting, an August meeting, and then after August, we'd go to October, and then December. That allows us to get our budget information into the county a lot sooner. They would actually love and adore us more for that. But then also that would help us avoid having meetings back to back, November, December, and then again in January. And then also, you know, November, December, we get into the holiday season and winter. So anyway, I just think Vermilion Water Basin bases their bi-monthly meeting on this schedule, and I just think it would, you'd have twice a year where you'd have monthly meetings back to back, but. So I guess we can make that an agenda item for approval at the next meeting, but.
I think that's how we should, yeah, do it. You introduced it, and we'll act on it in November.
Okay.
Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm closer. 209. All right. Apologize for the short delay. We'll try to get through this quick as we can. Does everybody have their budget items out?
It's,
You have this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I got it. I got 210. All right. Okay, this is a public hearing statement for the hearing that I'm supposed to read. This is the time and place set by the published notice for hearing statements of arguments relative to the budget proposed by West Dakota Water Development District Board. All interested parties may make a statement. Persons who have indicated they wish to make a statement will be called in the order in which they have signed in. Afterwards, anyone else may make a statement. Before speaking, please give your name and address for the minutes. If the presentation is typed, please briefly summarize it, and the board will review it before passing the budget. All right. Is there anybody that has any comments on the budget? Okay. To open it up for discussion with the board, I don't see anybody with any comments. If we can make a motion to approve to move on to discussions if we haven't.
Motion to approve the budget for discussion purposes.
Motion to approve, looking for a second.
a second.
Got a second by Sandra. Open for discussion. Questions, comments, suggestions? I'll probably say, does anybody have comments or suggestions or comments? We've kind of reviewed over this the last couple of meetings, so in preparation. Carrie? Oh, yeah.
I do have a comment. On the publishing, I think that we should go with just a column in the notices in the paper, and to refer people to the website to read our minutes instead of publishing the whole minutes there. That would save us some money.
We're gonna talk about under the directors.
What?
We just agreed to talk about that under the directors.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll move that down because that's kind of a separate item.
Okay.
You don't have any concern with that value other than we can reduce
No.
it, so, okay. Hearing no further comments, Director Jasper, not unless you have any comments on the budget, we have a motion to approve. Second, we've gone through the discussion and have had none, other than on an ancillary item. And was curious if you had any questions or
Since I
comments.
just got here, no, I don't think I have any.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
All opposed? Okay, everybody was in favor, and we have one abstention. Mr. Jasmine. All right. That will move us to the Rapid Creek 319 project. We've kind of referred to that, changed the name of that to refer to the Rapid Creek Clean Water Initiative, just to kind of give that project a name. Just to give you a little background on where we're at and why we're here to discuss that. We've invited quite a few people here to listen in. The Rapid Creek, there's an analysis that goes on with every creek and water body in South Dakota, and it's called the TMDL assessment. It's analysis where the state or a consultant for the state goes out and analyzes constituents and pollutants at stream or that water body. In doing that analysis, they compare that with standards for that stream as the designated uses for that stream. And I'm going to have people clarify this a little bit better than I can, but I just given kind of a briefly overview of each piece of the puzzle we're going to talk about today. That analysis was completed by South Dakota DENR and a consultant, kind of in pieces and ongoing. The determination of that was an impairment for bacteria and total suspended solids. We have guests here that are going to talk further about that as well. Where we're at right now, we're at a juncture where when you have an impairment, at some point you need to address that impairment. And we had North Water, a consultant, approach us and ask us if we would sponsor them to address the problem. And we indicated we would. And as we got going in the process, we kind of got a little bit more educated and learned, and we wanted to slow down. And so what we did is we asked North Water if we could hire them as a consultant, a short-term consultant, to identify and educate us on the process and identify who should be involved, other financial resources, and all that fun stuff. Because we didn't want to dive in without knowing a little bit more about what we were doing, which is good. They agreed to do that, and so where we're at now is we're going to have 3 different entities talk today. North Water's going to give us an update on where they're at with the work they're doing for us. Then after that, Barry McClary and Bob Smith with DENR are going to discuss the TMDL sampling that was done on Rapid Creek, the extent of it, and some of their thoughts. Pete Jarvis and Rich Hansen. I don't think Rich is here today, is he? So Pete Jarvis is going to talk about the Clean Water Act Section 319 process. That's a process with EPA, and my understanding of how EPA addresses water is you have point source pollution. That's for like a company I work with. You got regulations that my company has to comply with water discharges, and then they have this other section called 319 that addresses non-point pollution sources, and that's your pollution that doesn't come from a point source, such as where my company discharges water. We've got to make sure that water's clean when it goes into the creek. But these are non-point discharges, like from ranch land and from stormwater and all that fun stuff. And they'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But that's where we're at, and to kind of stay on track with what we're going today, I think how we'll move along with this is we'll have each individual give their presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions to the directors, and then we'll open it up to the public. So there's kind of no interruptions with the presentations, and they can move along, but answer those questions afterwards. So with that said, first up is Dave Holland with North Water.
Thanks, Tim. I'm just going to go through a few slides here today, try not to double up with what the DENR is going to be talking about, but I want to kind of tailor what I talk about specific to Rapid Creek and Rapid City, and kind of some history of sort of what's been done on Rapid Creek and Rapid City. I'll talk just a little bit about the timeline of this project, what North Water, what we're doing right now, and then what would be the next steps moving forward. So actually, before I get too far into it, I've got a little handout, kind of got the presentation on it. If you want to pass those around, please. The back of it kind of has a quick summary. One other thing, I'm going to have a contact sheet, if we can pass this around. A lot of you, I've contacted you to come to this meeting, to be here, so I've got your contact details. But it wouldn't hurt to put it on there if you're interested in being involved in the project, if you wouldn't mind putting your name, email, phone number, so we can follow up and contact you and possibly get you involved in the project.
Dave, do you
Sure.
have any other copies of that? 'Cause I don't think that
Sure.
record's got copies.
Sorry. There should be plenty.
Thank you.
The primary objective of our project is to address the TMDLs that have been established. DENR, I'll talk a little bit more about that. What I wanted to say is that there are 2 TMDLs, one on total suspended solids, or in layman terms, sediment, or fecal coliform bacteria. And I took the time to go through the TMDL document, and we're looking for our target for this project is to get a 26% reduction in solid sediment and a 74 to 95% reduction in bacteria. So that's a pretty significant reduction in bacteria. Those are the targets in the TMDL. Obviously, we'll be doing our best to achieve as much as we can reasonably. And to kind of, if those of you that aren't familiar with the TMDL, it's short for total minimum daily load. And it's basically the amount of pollution a water body can receive and still support its designated beneficial uses. There's a certain amount of pollution, I think, that we've established that the stream can handle and be a healthy stream. And then, so they set a limit at that, and anything above that is considered no longer meeting its use for the public or what it might be. So the TSS for sediment is mostly in the lower reach from Farmingdale downstream. The TSS for bacteria starts at Canyon Lake and goes downstream from there. We are proposing in this project to address the entire watershed. The way that we do watershed plans, it's pretty easy for us to just incorporate the whole watershed. That way in the future, if there's any issues in the upper reaches of the watershed that don't currently have a TMDL, then we have the plan in place that we can address those at that time, and we don't have to do it all over again. So that was our primary objective, is addressing the TMDL. Some of the secondary benefits of this process are stormwater management, fish habitat, parks and recreation, farming, ranching, conservation practices. And what I mean by that, so for stormwater, our cities and county are working constantly to manage their stormwater, partially because it does a lot of damage to our roads if they don't manage it properly, and also because they have a mandate to have a stormwater plan and follow that stormwater plan. This project can integrate with those efforts that are going on and provide some matching funds potentially. And also, the city and county often are probably looking at their area of their jurisdiction, but this will be an effort to incorporate that within the entire watershed. How does runoff in Rapid City or Pennington County affect the farmers and ranchers down in Farmingdale? This project will be an opportunity to pull that all together. Fish habitat, there's been a lot of research done on fish habitat, especially within Rapid City, and we've already been talking to the School of Mines and the results of that research, and this project can absolutely benefit the fishery within Rapid City and up and down Rapid Creek. Parks and recreation, I see a lot of the recommendations from this study coming out as open space, green space, so that we can get more infiltration where the rain lands rather than dealing with runoff as it accumulates further down the watershed. And so that'll mean more open space and space for parks and people to recreate. Conservation practices, actually this is the part that Northwater, what we specialize in. We have a lot of experience working with farmers and ranchers, and they also have a vested interest. So if the water is of a better quality in the watershed, then their livestock have a better water that they can utilize, but also preventing stream erosion. Farmers and ranchers are losing soil into the stream, and they get gullies on their property. And the same thing that improves water quality down in the creek can help a farmer and rancher by keeping that soil up on his property. So there's a lot of ancillary benefits to this project as well. A little bit of the timeline, go back a little, 1998, the DENR publishes a report every 2 years and sends it to the EPA on the state of our water in our state. And Rapid Creek was listed on their list of impaired water bodies in 1998, so it's been on there quite some time. In 2010, there was a TMDL written for bacteria that I mentioned, and 2011, one for sediment. So where we're at right now is phase 1 project support, who's interested, and putting together a planning grant. So what we've done, Northwater, is tried to reach out to as many people as we could, invite you to this meeting, number one, kind of a kickoff educational session. And then hopefully we can follow up with you and see how you can plug into the project and what you might be interested in doing. Because ultimately, the 319 program, that's different from, say, stormwater permits. It's a voluntary program. We can only participate on people's property that allow us to be there and are volunteers in the program and are willing to participate. So we're looking for people to volunteer to get some of those benefits that I mentioned earlier. This is phase 1 of our project that the West Dakota Board has asked us as Northwater to do. The 2 things that we've started doing already is identify potential supporters. So we put together a list of contacts and people, and I reached out to as many on that list as I could and invited them to this meeting. The next steps that we'll be doing in the next couple months is defining the project scope and securing written commitments. So the project scope has a lot to do with the players, the stakeholders, you guys that are here today. What are you interested in doing? What are you willing to do? And we want to have your input in the very early stages of the document so that we don't get down the road and we're not able to do what we said we wanted to do. And then securing written commitments. So the 319 program is a grant match, a 60-40 grant match. And so we as a project are looking for entities that are willing to put up the 40% match. It can be either in kind or cash. But that'll be part of the written commitment. And if your organization doesn't have money to contribute, you can still have a role in it. We don't want to exempt you just because of that. Moving forward, so our part of the project is probably going to wrap up towards the end of this year, first part of next year. And then we'll move into the planning phase in the 2015, 2016. Hopefully, we're shooting to submit our first planning grant October 1, 2015. And that's usually about a year, the way we handle them. And then an implementation phase would be a year after that. I want to talk just a little bit about kind of the meat of the planning of the project, at least the way we do them, just so you kind of get a feeling for where we're going with this. The first thing we do is to generate a thorough understanding of the watershed. So we go out and look at the watershed. We also tap a lot of resources that have already been collected in the watershed. There are a lot of entities, I see the USGS in the city and the county, that have been collecting data over the years. We mine all that data and pull it all together in a GIS program so that we don't have to repeat and a lot of work that's been done already. Interact directly with key watershed landowners. So this is our best way early on in the process to decide what we're going to do, is to meet people on their land and look at it and see what potentially could be done and what they're interested in doing. Identify site-specific practices, what I just kind of mentioned. Quantify pollution loading. So like I mentioned early in the presentation, there is a target. We want to reach a certain reduction of sediment, a certain reduction of bacteria. And so the grant requirements require that we estimate how much reduction we're going to have by putting that BMP in. And I'll talk just a little bit about how we do that, quite simply. Establish critical areas to determine load reductions, and prepare a plan according to the grant has 9 minimum elements, and I'm kind of going over a handful of them. Characterize the watershed, like I mentioned earlier, data mining, getting all the different GIS layers from the different organizations. engaging key staff and organizations, interpreting aerial imagery, and meeting with key landowners. I talked a little bit about quantifying pollution loading, and I'm going to talk about how exactly we do that in that next one, establish critical areas, and in my next couple slides here. So there are a couple different ways other companies would use HSPF or a couple other different models to do a watershed plan, to model the watershed and how the runoff interacts and washes whatever pollutant or contaminant into the creek. We use GIS. GIS, most people see it as a mapping software. You know, what you put into it is what you get out of it. You're just drawing maps. But it actually has a calculation module within it, and we run simulations with all the data that we put into it. So some of the important inputs to this model are the soil type, the land cover, precipitation, land use. We also try and, if it's not available, try and create it impervious surface layers. And we put all that information together to try and predict where our runoff is going to come from, how much runoff, and what's going to be coming with that runoff. So here's a quick little case study, some maps that we produced for another project that we did. So this is our land use layer. It's color-coded by what different land use it might be. Industrial might be expected to have certain runoff characteristics. Residential would have others, depending on the land use. So we overlay the land use layer with precipitation data, and we get an annual runoff. And we color code this map. So red is more runoff, and dark green is less runoff. So this is moving us down the track of creating our model. And based on those land uses and soil types and soil slopes, we can create another map that shows our annual sediment load. This map is really important for what we do, because you see the red areas on that map. That tells us which landowners to go talk to. Rather than just having a blanket, let's just build some BMPs in our watershed, this map shows us where we can have the most bang for our buck, because we have limited resources. So we want to be able to maximize those resources. This is a similar map for bacteria. You know, this is just an estimate based on our model and computer-generated data. We certainly do go out and field verify, go look at the site and see if it makes sense that there's bacteria coming from here. And then the other key component is that landowner interested in participating. But you can see how these maps can be very powerful in helping us to develop this project and be effective. On the back side of the handout I gave you is some contact details. If you'd like to get a hold of me, if you're interested, if you wouldn't mind, shoot me an email or call me on the phone. That'd be great, and I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Well, check to see if there's questions from the directors first.
Oh, sure.
Any questions? Dan?
Can we get these bacteria loads and sediment loads in color?
Sure, no problem.
If you just email, or are they in the Dropbox?
You know the ones you had up here? It's just a,
Yeah, no problem. I can give you one in color.
I have that right.
Okay.
A quick question then.
Foster has a question for you.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Foster.
he's right. I was wondering if you could flip back to the map on
Sure.
like first slide or so.
The Rapid Creek one?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I understand the area. And and there are two different criteria here. Is it the same exact area for the two criteria? Are they different?
No, they're different.
Could you point out what they are, just to make sure we're clear?
Sure. Sediment starts just upstream of Farmingdale.
Okay, so it's just that little lower area down there.
It's just this little lower area. But if
And then the rest of the watershed is the bacteria, or where's that?
bacteria starts up at Rapid City at Canyon Lake.
Canyon Lake down.
Down.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Thank you.
But it's mentioned in the TMDL document, and we also concur that a large source of the sediment that's being washed here is coming from bank erosion. And the 2-year storm event has increased sixfold in a 10-year period that was looked at. So what does that mean? So we have precipitation data, obviously, and we have a 2-year storm. You've heard of the 100-year flood? We have a 2-year storm. So they expect that storm to happen once every 2 years. But from 2000 to 2010, a 2-year storm happened 3 times a year. And it wasn't that we had more rain, it was that we had more runoff to the creek. So we were getting more peak events, more peak flows going in that creek, and those banks aren't stable enough to handle those more often peak flows, and that's why we're getting a lot of bank erosion in the lower reaches. So if we can reduce runoff, slow it down, we can, that's kind of what's driving that sediment problem downstream, if that makes sense.
Any other questions from board members? Anybody in the public have any comments for Dave? Questions?
Just a short question, Dave. Are you looking at any other constituents besides TMDL and TSS?
That's not an uncommon question, and we do that quite often. We have a mandate from the DENR to look specifically at TSS and bacteria, but if any of the stakeholders involved in the project want us to look at anything else, we've looked at nitrogen, we've looked at phosphorus, we've looked at chlorides. I know chlorides can be an issue. So if there are any other contaminants of interest, if we incorporate them into the process early on, we can certainly do that too.
Thank you.
Sir.
Back in the back row.
Lisa?
Do you have any plans of looking at what portion of the bacteria are affected in general?
I guess that'll come out in our conversations with the stakeholders. It's still a little bit unclear what the source of the bacteria is. There's a lot of guesses in the TMDL document, but I think we want to do a little bit of digging and research to figure out what the source is. And certainly that would help if we could, kind of figure out what it looks like, where it might be coming from. We think that, some of the inputs of bacteria are potentially, broken sewer pipes or septic tanks that could be close to the creek, but it could also be surface runoff. And so those are the two kind of divides right now. So we're thinking if we reduce runoff, it solves our sediment problem, but could also reduce our bacteria problem.
Mark, did you have a question?
Well, just the bacterial reduction goals, I know the goals, but that's often ambitious.
Well, that's what I'm just putting up there with the TMDL documents.
But I guess my point, or my question actually is, almost every other place in the state where we've tried to do reductions in bacteria by best management practices, it's always been stymied. It's difficult. And what thoughts and ideas do you have in terms of actual management actions that could be taken to reduce bacteria loads?
I think first we have to try and get a handle on where it's coming from. I think the county has actually, and the city, has done a lot in that regard in the septic inspection program, trying to sort of go at that possible solution. Some of these things are really long-term. So one of my personal thoughts is we could spend a lot of money really analyzing and overstudying the issue, but in the meantime we're not, we might have used all our money up before we actually got to implementation. So I feel like the TMDL did a lot of time studying, and a lot of other entities have done a lot of time studying. We will certainly have a monitoring component of this project, but we want to just take those ideas from the TMDL and a little bit more analysis and do something about it, I think is more kind of the focus of where we want to go.
It'll be interesting to hear that.
Yeah.
It'll be a challenge.
Anybody else with questions? All right, just one note on the processes and on the phase one, and as Dave talked about, the next phase is we're required to go out and ship this out to everybody with an RFP, and part of this process is to have North Water develop an RFP as we move forward. So everybody, and then we'll have an interview process to whoever we hire to do the project. But North Water is doing the first phase, and I'm sure they will put in an application for the second phase as well. So with that said, we shall move on to Pete Jarls.
Yes. Which button do you push? Just the forward arrow here?
Just the forward arrow, yeah.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Chairman Rogers and Denise for inviting us to come out and speak to you today. I'm going to reintroduce myself so you kind of have some idea of what I do, and what my function is with what we call our watershed protection program. I'm currently the administrator of that program. Barry McLowry here is what we call our team leader for the implementation section of the 319 non-point source program. And Bob Smith is our scientist stationed out here in Rapid City. And we're going to kind of jump around a little bit just so you get some idea of what our function really is in the process that we go through to manage and to implement the 319 program for EPA. Most states have taken on that role. And again, it's part of our function in the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to move this program through and hopefully address the issues with our water quality and bring them back to meeting their beneficial uses. And so basically we've got really three types of things that we do. We basically assess, rate TMDLs, we move to implementation, and then a part of that we also assist with information, education, monitoring, and evaluation. As you've already heard, this is a voluntary type program, so we can't make anybody do anything. It all has to come from local interest, local support, wanting to move forward not only first with assessing, but then also with implementation. And you also heard that we can't force anybody, and I'm not talking about us. DENR does not force. Once a local sponsor has come forward, they've got an approved project implementation plan, they hire their people, they go through day to day and run that project. We're there, again, as technical assistance support to help them. I mean, we're involved with the money aspect of it. We've got a tracking system, and we won't get into all of that. But we just wanted to try and lay this out for you, kind of step by step, on what we do with this program and how we implement the program. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Smith, who's going to kind of go through the whole assessment process and how we come to writing and getting TMDLs approved through EPA. And then I'll get back up here and talk a little bit more about where we go once we have a TMDL and we move into implementation.
I'm going to skip that slide. So this is just the information that I have on the Rapid City watershed assessment that was done on TMDLs. Just a brief overview is what it is. I started out by, a lot of the stuff was covered by some of the other top speakers, I should say. All waters in the state have beneficial uses, and each one of the uses has water quality standards attached to them. There's a list of the beneficial uses. The shaded ones are the ones that apply to Rapid Creek. The ones in colors are the segments, I'll show them that next, but the segments that are impaired and for what constituent. A lot of them you can see are fine. There's no colors in there, so they are meeting their uses for those. And they have to have a greater than 10% of the samples exceed water quality standard over a 5-year period to get listed. I know it's a little hard to read. To be considered impaired. And they already talked about the 303D list, and that's part of the integrated report. Okay, I have one around here. And that's on all waters of the state. And we already did what TMDL is, so I'll just keep going. I don't have a pointer either, but these are all the sites that we and other MCs that sampled. The only thing that isn't on here is our WQM sites, like the Farmingdale site. This is Preston, Farmingdale, Caputa, That way you don't have to look at it. And then the wastewater treatment plant's here, so we had site below and above. The one below is another WQM site of ours. The little dot there is the cold water, warm water break point there between segments. So the ones in Rapid City here, that's a cold water fishery and then a permanent. And then the middle section and lower section are warm water permanent fisheries. And again, it was said that down this last yellow segment down here is the one for sediment. And all three, well, sorry, I'll keep going on this.
Bob, yeah, I'm just gonna interrupt for just a minute. I think, I don't know if you picked up on that we have what we call an integrated report. And that's just two different reports. Used to be, and they just combined them. And part of that is what we call the 303D list, which is impaired water bodies. And once, through our annual sampling process, it's determined that one of the beneficial uses is impaired, it's not meeting that beneficial use, it goes on to the impaired waters list. And when it goes on the impaired waters list, we're required by EPA to do an assessment and write a TMDL on that impairment. From that point on, we are not required to implement, but we are required to write a TMDL once they go on that impaired waters list. They give us 13 years from the initial listing.
More detail. And then like these little stars here where Game Fish Parks did a study. I used some of their data. And then the above Canyon Lake one is a WQM site also for us. And just downstream of this Cement Plant Creek is another WQM site for a monthly site. So there's actually a lot of data on the system. Let's see. Oh, these are on the water quality standards that were exceeded for immersion recreation. There's two recreational standards, the immersion recreation and limited contact. The immersion recreation standard is more stringent than the limited contact, and this was the one that was exceeded. So, and most of the sites, it's 400 colony forming units per 100 mils is the standard. So, the limited contact is for fecal coliform is 2,000 and 1,000 for the geometric mean of minimum of 5 samples over a 24-hour period in the same 30-day period, and then they take the geometric mean of that, and it must be lower than 200. So, and then for the and then E. coli, we started sampling in 2009 at most of the sites. We only had one site, let me go back to it. We only had one site that had enough E. coli data to write up the TMDL, and that was the one down here at Farmingdale. And it violated for fecal coliform and E. coli. And then the sediment standard is 158. So we'll need to linger on that. We used low duration curves to determine and evaluate the system. And this is above Canyon Lake before it hits the city. And basically the black line here is the standard based on flow. And so, and load. So you can see there's nothing above it, so everything's met since 1946 above town for fecal coliform. And then we're going to look at the other end of the creek. And this is down at Farmingdale, below Farmingdale. And you can see here we have exceedances up above the lines here, a little bit down in here, and oh, you can't see that at the bottom. Too bad. This is the TMDL right here calculation, but at the bottom it shows impairments. That says 80%, I think it is down there. And so you can see there's a lot of exceedances over the TMDL standard based on load, and it's less down there. I'm sorry about that. I thought you could actually see it, but either way, they correlate between the reductions needed and the exceedance that you have in there. So you have zeros every place you don't have anything above the line. Pretty simple to interpret. Easy, I should say.
Bob, do you mind if I?
Wow, that's bad. What's that?
Bob, would you go back to that one once?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry if I interrupt, but there was a question earlier about getting at the source of the bacteria, and one of the things that is a little bit, once you hear it, it's like, oh, that makes sense, is if you have a runoff event and you get a spike in bacteria after a runoff event, then it's, from surface, whatever is on the ground, and the rain washes it into the creek. But if you have a baseline high bacteria loading, then that would suggest something more like a septic tank or a sewer pipe that is not dependent on rain events. And so, a graph like this kind of tips us off on what our sources might be.
And then you can, down here, like I say, I guess I should have used a different copy and paste because you can't read it very well. But those are the flow zones. These are so high flow zone, moist, mid, and low. I keep going there. I got too many slides. It's really hard. What I wanted to show here, you can't see it here, but there's a 78, 93, 87. This is in the in-town one. So the only zero we have is down in the low flows. And that's from, well, basically 9 to almost 0 CFS. So it pretty much exceeded any other time. Or the downstream below the wastewater treatment plant, we had just the two higher flow zones exceed in both of them. The funny one was the flow zone there. We had one, it's the exceedances in fecal coliform and E. coli. Let me just get you to see that. Now we can actually see the numbers. So that's, the wastewater allocation again is 0 because there's no point sources in that segment. In segment 5 down at the end. And the load allocation is all of the loading. It's basically, this margin of safety is, our margin of safety for this project was using interquartile range. So that's where these numbers come from. So you have your TMDL calculated out at the 95th percentile. I'm not going to explain those, but, and this is the difference. So that's what you need for a load allocation in order to meet this TMDL. You can see we have 10,006, 10,006, and we need a 59% reduction in bacteria in just that high flow zone in order to meet the TMDL. And we'll look at sediment here at 5. And this is all the data that we have here. Lots of colors, some are like recent data, but it's all still. One thing that's modified on this one too is instead of having our high flow zone from 10% to 0, the uppermost flows, we moved it down to the 20% in order to incorporate all the exceedances. After that, we really only had 3. So there we just have the 26% reduction required. See where we're at. These potential, this is too wordy, I know. I underlined some of the stuff that was interesting from the results. We just had a steady increase from late spring to the midsummer. I listed the possible sources here. A lot of the stuff's a little redundant because a lot of the watershed, basically from Hawthorne down, is agricultural, so a lot of the PMPs would be similar. But event sampling shows a different response, of course. due to runoff from the suburban land use areas. Include. Yeah, I'm gonna, this is, I'm gonna keep going here. These are the other two, but we estimated there was a 40% of the load was coming from segment 3 here through town. There was loading in the lower segment 4. So any kind of plans that would incorporate and improve set of TSS loading and any of them, TSS, bacteria, would be advantageous to the segments downstream. Because we showed 92 to 98% was agricultural, which was pasture land, rangeland, or cropland. So it's grazing managed exclusionary fencing, off-stream watering practices, installation of livestock stream crossing to try and keep them away from them. One of the more interesting ones is the those are the septic tanks around Rapid Creek, and the blue one is 4 and the green one is 5 down there.
What area is that, Bob?
What's that?
What area are those two?
Area?
Yeah, what segment, is that Farmingdale?
Oh, sorry, this is 4. So there's the airport, and this is the break point for the cold water and warm water. Here's Rapid City.
Okay.
So this is above Farmingdale. So this is just below the wastewater plant down there. There's a housing development down there.
Bob, I have a question about that. So is that break point between the cold water and the warm water, is that above or below the outfall from the water treatment plant?
Oh, it's above.
Above it.
It's above, yeah. And there's a WQM site there called 110, and that's above too. So we have a lot of data, but one thing that was interesting was that the vegetation, at least by visual observation and by over Google Maps, is there's a lot more vegetation in segment 5 than there is in 4. And what we looked at, the way I looked at it at least, was that there was a lot more bacteria generated in 5, just because I think that the only thing there was vegetation for them to stand under and cool off along the stream, where in 4 it doesn't have as much, and you can see a significant increase in the bacterial loading. So, and this uncertainty on the dry flow zone in segment 5, I attributed that a lot to the wastewater treatment plant discharge. And this may not be right. I mean, as last time I talked to them is after September, when the recreation season doesn't take into effect, they turn off their UV lights, and so they'll discharge higher amounts of bacteria. And then you could have a lot more loading. And one thing that I was looking at is maybe it would be interesting or advantageous to actually look at sediments or bacteria survival in sediments and pre-suspension. Later on, and they can live up to 6 months, I've read, in the sediments. So if they get redisturbed, they'll be able to be picked up in our samples during the event. So I think that would be a good thing to add to a project. That's just an idea, because we don't know. All we can just use is published material. I got TSS. I got the E. coli, and basically that says is that it's the same as the bacteria sources. So, in TSS we use the Anagnos model, and they do it. And the interesting part was 41% was allotted to in-channel loading with this mass wasting, just like what they were talking about, channel migration. I have one thing that I didn't look at was to see if the Cheyenne River is cut down quite a bit, and so Rabbit Creek is down cutting in order to try and match the energy. So if it's down cutting more excessively, you're going to see a lot more erosion in that last segment, and you would have more in-channel sediment. So I just went through that fast, and I didn't cover everything everybody wanted. Any questions? Thoughts?
I've always got a question. I was wondering if you could go back to one of your tables that show the low flow zones, the different zones. I just want to make sure we understand that, what you're showing us. Like that is fine. So you got flow zone, high, moist, mid-range, dry, low. Are you talking about this is like seasonal, or is this cross-sectional through the stream, or different reaches of the stream? I'm not sure I understand.
This is for segment 5 from above Farmingdale to the mouth.
Okay, so what's the difference in?
And so,
I mean, is Rapid Creek ever 15 cubic feet per second?
what's that?
This is for Rapid Creek, right?
Yeah, right.
So is Rapid Creek ever within that low? Is it ever below 15 cubic feet per second?
Well, it has been within the last, I don't know what the years,
It has been, because it's usually
50
up
years or whatever.
between 50
Yeah,
and
it's
100
usually-
or something. This
I
seems
know
like a
that,
really low number.
the lowest I've seen it on the record, at least, was 11.
Okay, so it does
But
get
that was
low.
up near the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay,
But in this, of course,
So
it
this
gets
is
up
for a-
really high.
a certain gauge station and this different flow conditions over a period of time.
Right, and then you can just calculate a load,
Okay.
and that's where you get the TMDL line. So you get
And
a,
so what would be the span of time for this? For that flow data? I mean,
the time.
yeah, like how long was data collected for the
Oh.
data on this?
The data itself is collected over a long period, because I took some long-term data. USGS doesn't collect equal coliform, but as far as TSS and stuff, they do. Well, USGS collects suspended sediment concentration, and our standard is TSS, and there's not a real good correlation between it. So we don't use their data for that. Usually they'll contact us and say, it's higher, but we can't use it in our exceedance because it's a different animal. So
And the flow data, how long is that collected?
as
for?
long as the USGS has.
So, long time, decades, okay.
On some of those short-term projects where there's no USGS data, you can use a couple different programs, EDAS and stuff, to try and estimate what the flow would be based on some other creeks. But we'll take flows, like I'm doing a study on Whitewood Creek. So every time I take a sample, I take flows, and then I'm up there weekly, so I'm taking flows a second time. So I'm getting as many as I can to develop some kind of a curve, even though in certain areas of it, there's maybe not a lot of good data. So you're
If I could just say something here, Bob. The state has water quality monitoring sites scattered around, and so every year after year after year, we're sampling. We're going out, there's a system set up, and they go out and they take samples. And that's how we determine initial impairments, initial beneficial use impairments where a water body isn't meeting that beneficial use. That is what initially puts it on the impaired waters list, and that kicks in the timeline that DENR is required to do an assessment and write a TMDL on that impairment. And so you can see then when in the department schedules that, we schedule when we want to do these TMDLs, and then with local assistance, generally some kind of a contractor, plus DENR does a fair amount of some of these assessments themselves, it really gets intense. And they go out and they do a lot of extra sampling that results in the information that Bob's showing you today.
and one of the faults of, go ahead.
Yes, all this data now that you presented here, where is that so that we can look at it? Because, trying to
Oh, yeah.
absorb everything here in a short time is rather difficult.
Yeah, the data, if you want to analyze it yourself, you mean?
Mhm.
We have, it's, you just
Is
need
it
to
in a
contact.
report, I mean?
What's that?
Is it in a published report?
Yes,
Okay.
the data itself,
And it's on our website
It's
also.
on our website,
Or you
too.
can call us and we can send you a copy or direct you to the right place on the website
Okay.
if you want it.
Can you explain the warm water and cold water, what
Well,
that
and it-
consists of?
And it's a point on a map, but it's not actually realized by the fish. So usually you get,
How do you know?
usually you get trout and stuff down further, or the warmer water fish up further, bass up in this area, things like that every so often.
So
But it's
more-
just
He's asking like the temperature differences, what makes one warm, what makes one cold, what the categories.
65 degrees for the cold, and I think it's 70, I don't know for the warm water, permanent, 72 maybe, for a minimum. That's what that is.
Bob, are you taking continuous samples? I mean, you got your sampling database. Does that continue on at some of these points every year
Yes.
on a frequency basis? Is that
Right.
once a year?
Well,
or
on the
is that
Rapid Creek monitoring sites, it's monthly.
monthly?
But see, the only bad part, and I'm not just saying, is that our surface water people that collect the samples don't collect any flows. So if there's not a USGS site there, they're just, you have a sample, it exceeded, but you don't know what the load is. So we're trying to improve and put monitoring sites for flow at each of the sites, and then have the monitoring for flow to get a rating curve and flow monitors.
Other questions from directors?
I'm just curious to know how many people in the audience have land along this way, or is there anybody here who has property down that way for this study? Nobody? Okay.
I do think there are people here representing areas in this thing that are impacted.
Yeah, a lot of that's in my area.
Well, I was just curious if any of the landowners came up to see what's going on.
Bob, before I pass it on to the public, I had a question on, we talked a little bit about trying to control. Somebody brought up, what types of controls are there for the bacteria? In your experience, have you seen bacteria controlled in other areas that were effective? Some type of, you mentioned a couple things up there, but did you see anything that's really effective? And
Well, I'm going to say no, but I'm going to also caveat that with there's a study in Skunk Creek, is that a 5-year project, that they've done a lot of BMPs to control bacteria in Skunk Creek out east near Sioux Falls. And there's a 5-year project that's funded to extensively sample that after these BMPs have been in, to see if they can actually see a calculated difference. A lot of times you just see, like, I think the wastewater treatment plant's going to put in another bank of UV filters, so they can kill off more of the bacteria. And I'd like to work with them too, is to try and get them to run that thing year round instead of just during the recreation season. And like I said, they might, but as far as last time I talked to them, they weren't. So, but for your question, I don't have any.
And I can maybe add a little bit more to that. Over east, we do a lot of things with livestock, because they're generally one of the, or they are sometimes the entity that's causing the pollution. And so you've all heard animal waste systems. And if you got an animal waste system that's on a drainage way, logic tells you that it's an issue. And a lot of times we move those. It's a voluntary landowner that wants to move those, and you put in a 100% containment system, and you've taken care of the issue, at least in that particular site. The other thing we do is buffers. And again, in the Skunk Creek, we're piloting what we call a seasonal riparian area management practice, where basically through the recreation season, April 1st through the end of September, the landowner has agreed to remove the cattle from there. He can hay it, but he has to leave a certain height, and then he can go in the fall if he chooses to, and he can graze. And we provide alternative water and so forth if he needs that. And this is our first year of monitoring down there, and it appears that in those sections that we have buffered now, that with this particular project, we are seeing a trend line that's going down as far as bacteria in that particular section. So there are those common sense type things that we know are basically addressing the issue in a particular spot. It gets a little tougher when you're looking at the bigger picture.
Pete?
And septic.
Pete?
Yes.
There's been quite a bit done in the Belfouche watershed.
Right. And the trend line shows that, and that's dealing just with total suspended solids. And that trend line has also been declining up there. We've done a couple success stories. EPA requires us to do a success story each year on one impaired segment, and that's being implemented. And when that goes off, we hope, goes off the list, meaning it's meeting its beneficial use for that impairment, then we put together a little short write-up on that, and then they put those out on their website. So there are successes. Things do work, but it's a long process in most cases to get to that success. It takes years and years sometimes.
In the Rapid City section, obviously we don't have livestock and stuff, and cows. What, in an urban area like that, or what, have you seen certain types of controls? Because obviously we're impaired from Canyon Lake down.
The thing, and maybe Bob can talk about it too, but this is a non-point source program, so we can't deal with point sources in a permitted situation. In other words, stormwater, the City of Rapid City has to be permitted. They have a permit that requires them to do certain things and so forth and so on. And so we can't work with that through the 319 program because it's a permitted facility. It's a point source type situation. So as a rule, we don't get involved a lot in stormwater. The only project that right now that we're dealing with some stormwater issues is in Hill City, because Hill City is not big enough to be permitted under the requirements that EPA requires. And so we're just now getting underway to addressing some of those things, and there's an engineer in here. They may be able to tell you more what some of the non-hard type practices that you can use as far as addressing it. And they are doing that up in the Spring Creek, and they're going to start on that here shortly. So.
Yeah, I was kind of also curious on what our sources would be, because since we don't have cows,
I'm guessing, I'm not a scientist, but I'm assuming stormwater is part of the issue. But again, I don't know what you guys came up with in the TMDL. I suppose stormwater was part of that.
Stormwater was and a lot of the tributaries, like I live over on Arrowhead Street on there, where that, I don't know what the name of the creek is, but during runoff event, it's pretty high in bacteria. I know USGS has been studying Galen. He might be able to, I do have some of his data, but I don't have a lot. Here's that.
Any questions?
Well, we better move on, I guess. I think. Okay, question.
Dan?
Yeah, can we get a hard copy of this brief?
Yes, we got the PowerPoint. Any questions from the crowd for Bob?
I'm going to finish up fairly rapidly here, so you can ask questions if you have them. But again, just to refresh everybody, we get a stream segment, a lake, river, put on the impaired waters list. We're required to do a TMDL assessment. It has to go through the process. It goes to EPA, and they end up eventually approving it. Sometimes it comes back and forth, then we have to do some rewrites and so forth and so on. From that point on, we're not required to implement. There are times where we encourage a local entity or a sponsor to implement, but we can't make somebody implement. And so, in order for this type of a project to move forward, if you as local people want to start an implementation project, we would certainly, because that's what we do, we would get involved with you and we would help you put that together to move it in through our funding process. There are certain things that we do fund more than others, and that's the list that I put up there, and you guys can read that for yourself. We used to fund a lot more different types of things way early on. The program really got initiated back in 1990. I wasn't involved with the program at that point in time, but they did more of a diverse set of BMPs. But what happens if you're interested in implementing, what we normally work with, if somebody's interested, is we take the information from the assessment and the TMDL, which includes the impairments, it includes targets for reductions, and it includes suggested best management practices for moving forward with implementation. And then from that point on, again, as I said, we'll work with the sponsor, whoever that may be, to put together what we call a project implementation plan. Just ahead here a little bit.
I have a question, Lee.
Yep.
You said stormwater isn't covered because Rapid City has a permit?
Right, there's about a dozen cities that are large enough in South Dakota that are required to have a stormwater permit.
Okay, so the stormwater dumps into Rapid Creek, so Rapid Creek is through Rapid City, is not eligible, or just?
Well, it's not eligible for our funding. That doesn't mean there isn't other funding that they can use to address that.
No, but when they address the Rapid Creek problem right now, isn't that what they want the 319 fund for now? They can't do it through Rapid City because Rapid City is permitted for the stormwater?
We can't spend $319
Anywhere in Rapid City?
dealing with the issue of stormwater, if it's stormwater issue in
It
Rapid
has to be
City.
before and after. Before Rapid City and after.
For $319. That doesn't mean there isn't other dollars. I mean, it could be part of this project, and I don't want to take up too much time if you guys have questions, but there are a lot of other funding sources out there. And we're, in most cases, not the major funding source in most of our implementation
So
projects.
if the point source is an issue through Rapid City, if it's dumping into the outlining area, then Rapid City has to take care of that issue themselves without any grant.
No, no, there are loan programs. We have what we call the Clean Water State Revolving Fund.
Okay.
And I'm sure they've had loans through that, and that's to address infrastructure, sewers, sewage treatment plants, upgrade and improve things. And I believe that they can use dollars in there to address some of the stormwater issues. I know Sioux Falls has done that. And I don't know if Rapid has or not. I'm guessing they maybe have. So there are other avenues to doing things.
I just didn't know if you meant point source for just stormwater or not.
No.
Didn't include it.
It's anything that's a point source. Like we can't put money into a large feedlot that's called a concentrated animal feeding operation because it's considered a point source.
And they're supposed to legally be doing the right thing.
That's correct.
Okay.
They're required to have a permit to do things legally. Yep.
Thanks for verifying that.
Yep. Let's see, where was I at? Basically, we get together with the local people. We rely heavily on the assessment and the TMDL to put together the project implementation plan. It's not a difficult process, but it takes time because the local people really have to know what they want to try and address and what they truthfully think that they can get done. Again, it'd be different if this was a regulatory program where we could go out, we know this place is bad, but we can't make him do anything, or them, or so forth and so on. And so it really, the most important thing that you can do as a local entity is really try to figure out what is acceptable, what people are willing to do, spend their own money on with a little cost share in order to improve the situation to address the impairment. And so once that process is done, the application comes in. October 1st has been our deadline for the last 6 years anyway. And it goes through our process. I don't know if that's another slide up there, but this is just some of the application requirements. We've already talked about 60-40 match and so forth, and what we can and can't fund at certain times. But it goes through our process. It gets reviewed by not only DNR staff. We have what we call a non-point source task force. It's made up of 25 members, voting members. There are other people that participate on that task force that aren't voting members currently. If you want to be a voting member, you just have to, we usually like to look at statewide, some organization that is statewide has an interest in water quality, and you can participate. And so it goes through that process. Of course, we all meet and we talk about it. The staff makes funding recommendations. The task force either agrees or doesn't agree. Generally, we come to some consensus, and so from that point on, then we go to what we call our Board of Water and Natural Resources. And they're the ones that make the final decision on what and how much gets submitted to EPA for their actual review and approval or disapproval of what we've suggested or we've provided as far as funding and the projects we're going to fund. And from that point on, if you get funding, generally it takes, the process that we use now is we meet with the task force in early December, Board of Water and Natural Resources meets in January, and we provide them with our recommendations shortly thereafter. It's been probably 4 or 5 to 6 months before we hear back as far as what we, the state, are going to get in 319 funds for that particular year. It's been declining. We're probably down $600,000 from where we were 3 years ago. And so we as a state have been trying to backfill that with what we call our Clean Water SRF Water Quality Grant Funds. And so what we've been doing in the past 3 years is the projects, once we know what we're actually going to get and what was approved for funding, then sometimes we'll use a combination of the two funds, some state funds and 319 funds. Let's say a project was awarded $200,000, we might give 100 of this and 100 of that. So, and it seems to be working pretty well. Do I have anything else up there? Funding sources, I'll talk a little bit about those, and then I think I'll quit. But that's the process. We sign a contract with the local sponsor. You get assigned a project officer. It'll be the same person from DENR that was assisting you through the whole assessment phase. And then they'll be your daily contact, weekly contact, be the person you'll send your reimbursement requests through. We have a real extensive tracking system that all projects are required to use. Everything we do or they do is in there. And it's worked real well for us as far as tracking progress on projects and funding and what BMPs are selling and not selling and so forth. So, but this is just, I'm mainly going to go through the state funding sources. That's a Coordinated Soil Water Conservation Fund is a fund that goes through the South Dakota Department of Agriculture. Can be used for many of the same practices that we do. GFNP has a private lands program that a lot of the projects use. I mean, we help them with some of that, but most of the time they get connected with these local entities and are able to try and get some of these dollars. Consolidated Water Facilities Construction Fund, again, it's state money that comes through our omnibus water quality bill. It's mainly for construction activities, and some of our implementation projects choose to use that. One of the downsides with that is if it goes to an implementation project, they can only participate. Let's say they build an animal waste system. They can only use 15% of those consolidated funds in that particular practice. It doesn't matter what practice it is. And then the other percentages would come from the landowner, or 319, or maybe one of the USDA and RCS programs. And I mentioned the clean water, water quality grants that we're following up with. They're trying to backfill with loss of 319. Clean Water State Revolving Fund non-point source incentive loans. That's something that not too many people use. It's mainly cities in Watertown, Aberdeen, Sioux Falls, Mitchell has used them. And essentially what they do is they get a loan for clean water or SRF funds, state revolving funds, to upgrade their sewer system. If they want to, if there's a non-point source connection that's affecting something going on in the city, then they can ask for these incentive funds. And essentially what it is they get a lowered interest rate, which then allows them to borrow some additional money and not pay any more, basically pay the same amount as they would have if they just borrowed the same, pay back and the interest and so forth, the same, they wanted 100,000, they're not going to pay any more interest on it if they borrow 150,000, essentially is what it amounts to. And so they can make that money available then to the watershed project to do implementation money, just like our normal process as far as cost sharing with 319. You can see some of that, and they'll make copies of it for you, and so I'll probably quit there. And I think the last slide is just a picture. This just shows where we have current implementation projects going in the various watersheds. So that was pretty quick. I'll answer questions if you have them. Again, our role really is to administer this program for EPA. That's what we're doing. We have requirements and guidelines that we have to follow, and the local implementation projects and sponsors, we pass a lot of that down to them. They also have those requirements that they need to follow and track as far as using those dollars. And then for the local sponsors, we're here to provide and guide and assist you through the process and into the implementation and so forth. So.
Directors have questions for Pete? I had just a couple. One is the 319. Is that just a one-time yearly grant, or is that something you would apply for yearly?
We apply annually for the 319 funds that the state will get.
And the other programs in the state would do the same thing. If they had projects, they would do the same thing. Okay.
You're talking about the individual watershed projects?
Yes.
They don't apply to EPA directly. We apply to EPA annually for the funding that we're going to ultimately give out to the local sponsors. So the local sponsors are only dealing with the state.
But that the local sponsor would apply annually?
It depends on what you're doing and the need. We have some right now that do apply annually. Again, it just depends on the need.
And just one clarification on the city stormwater impact that like you indicated, there could be something other than stormwater impacting that we could apply for within the city to address it.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Questions from the...
As long as it doesn't relate to stormwater or some kind of a permit.
From the public?
Can you address do you receive enough in EPA grants annually to fund all the requests from your 319 partner?
No.
What's the disparity there?
Usually we end up $1 million to $1.5 million short with requests that come in on that probably. So then we work with, once we know what we're working with the dollars, then we have to talk to the sponsors and see if they're willing to do something different with less money. So that's why we're seeing maybe more and more projects might come back on an annual basis, where they didn't usually. They generally get funding for 2-3 years and then come back in that type of a frame. But there have been times where the recommendation is to fund half of the request of a particular sponsor.
Anybody else? I had one more question, but I figured somebody else had a chance. My question is you indicated we got an impairment, a major impairment, and there's no ramifications for fixing it. I mean, no hammer, EPA hammer, state hammer. If it stays impaired forever, that's just the way it is.
Right now, there's no hammer as far as requiring us to implement.
Okay.
So your guess is as good as mine whether that'll ever happen. You know, they're always tinkering with these programs. We're seeing them, you know, the 303D program is what we call the assessment TMDL program. They kind of look at that as separate from the actual implementation. We don't look at it as separate. It's just one program in our eyes. But since, you know, that's the way they kind of look at it, that's the way they kind of do it. But I think they're moving more and more and wanting to join the two in their minds a little bit better, even though we do it on the state level right now. And whether that ever translates into a requirement to implement, I don't know. And part of the issue too is if you don't have somebody locally that wants to do this, it's going to be a failure. And so forcing us to implement is probably never going to happen. In dollars is going to be the other.
One last chance for questions. Thank you. I want to thank you guys from State, Pete, Bob, Barry, for coming out. Really appreciate this. Has been very educational for me on what it is, and I believe everybody else has good input on what we're looking at and what we're doing. So, and very much, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
I think at this point we'll take a 10-minute break. I know there's some people that just came to listen to this, so that'll give you a chance to, if you want to continue on staying or leave, and then just give everybody a quick little break. That sound okay?
Hey, Dave.
And I think two other projects currently. Okay, we're good. Let's get rolling again. We can have everybody come back in, please.
I'm keeping a watch for bees too. My bee story.
Yes.
I'm okay.
It was an eye shut. Yeah. Kind of weird deal.
My email's caught up. Doors knocking on the way there's going well. Someone knock on doors today. That might be a little bit
So we need a glass on a few.
Let's call back to order, please.
Let's just start.
Do we have a quorum?
Dude, we need something. And we're.
Folks, we're going to get started again here.
Having been through it, you know, work and you got this.
All right. We're cruising through our stuff. We're on old business. I'll give an update on the Canyon Lake project. Where we're at the Canyon Lake project is they're going to start that project and redo the dam and actually rebuild it to what it currently is because it's leaking and has problems. And doing that, there's a sediment removal project that this district has been putting aside $10,000 a year for 10 years. So we had $100,000 to clean out the sediment to put in, and after it was reassessed, it's going to take like $415,000 to clean it out. So we kind of went to work. We've been busy working behind the scenes trying to get more funds for that project. West Dakota put up another $50,000, but asked for $50,000 matching funds with that. The Black Hills Fly Fishermen put up $10,000 for matching, and we've been working with the city on 2012 funds and some other funds that are hopefully out there to do it. The 2012 funds are used up. working with Terry Wolferstorff, and I went to the Public Works last week. They have some money in the capital improvement funds that they said they're going to get that money set aside, $60,000 to match ours. So hopefully we'll get that processed and get that money funded so we can build up the more sediment removal. Pay the people to do it because it's a major undertaking. The other item that we've been working on with Denise is applying for a grant through the city with actually one of the funds, the consolidated funds with the state water revolving fund, $150,000?
$155,000.
$155,000 to try to match up more with that money. So we find out about that in January, the middle of January, and the sediment removal project is going to probably continue on through January and February. So we'll have funds for that. Hopefully have funds for that if that gets approved. And I'll probably have to do a little lobbying with the Board of Water and Natural Resources. So if anybody knows anybody at the Board of Water and Natural Resources, give them a call, and I'll be doing the same. But is there any questions on Canyon Lake?
Just for clarification, the 60,000 hasn't gone to the city council yet, that was just with Public Works, correct?
Public Works, then it's going to go to the Capital Improvement Committee,
And
then
then
to
to
the
the
city.
Legal and
council.
finance.
Yeah, legal finance and city.
Right, and our 50,000 and the fly fishers, that's contingent upon being matched, right?
Correct.
Right, okay, just
Correct.
want to make sure everybody understands that.
Yep, that is
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Since they're running short on funds and it, the whole thing could fall apart, who knows? Have they reprioritized where they're gonna dig out the sediment?
We still, I don't have it with me, but those two areas, there's three areas. There was a blue, a yellow, and a white. We should have enough funds for the major public areas, the blue and the yellow, starting from the chop house, swinging around to where the public is. Then the rest will be used to get up in that white part out in the middle.
Right, if the additional 150 can be got, then we can get the whole thing cleaned.
Yeah, most of the whole thing. So-
Good.
Okay, good.
And we've been working, just two other quick notes on that. We're trying to work with the National Guard to even reduce further the cost of the contractor and have a project with them. They need to, one of their increases was having to build a bridge over the bypass tunnel because you can't drive heavy trucks over that tunnel, you'll bust it. Working with the National Guard to try to get them to do a bridge project for that, which will reduce the cost and get more money for sediment removal.
Okay, speaking of sediment, do they have a disposal plan?
Yes, it's going to go to South Dakota Cement Plant. Why they're going there is they don't have to pay for disposal. And the second thing is it's going to be a beneficial use to the cement plant for soil, and it's a short haul, so it reduces on haul cost as well, as compared to taking it, somewhere else to
Okay.
deal with it. So. Any other questions? All right.
Now, that should also help clean up the fecal matter from the bugs.
Yeah.
Duck yuck.
Duck yuck.
Tim, got a question for you. Any luck or any possibilities of other outside funding sources coming in?
We started with the pamphlet out there to try to get private money. We're still working on that. We have no firm commitments yet,
No
but
firm
we're continuing with that. So,
Okay.
and that'll be whether those people want to do to the Canyon Lake Fund or whether they want to do the stream enhancement up or below. So we're giving them that choice.
So when is that project or that portion going to get underway?
It's underway now, and
It is?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're going to continue on, and as we get
Okay.
that, we got a bank account set up for that money to go into, and any donors will, it's going to be through tax deductible as well.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
All right, Trinity Eco Prayer Park project funding request. This I got Ken Steichen and myself listed as the people to talk. We took the agreement, we shipped that agreement to everybody. I guess we're at the point of if everybody's comfortable with the agreement, we can move forward on action with it. And I think to do that, to open it up for discussion is to get a motion, a second, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So I'm entertaining a motion.
Laverne?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
A motion to approve?
Mm-hmm.
Second.
Steve?
Steve, second. Okay. We'll open it up to discussion.
I'll start.
Okay.
I'm very much in favor of the whole project. My objection has always been, and still is, we're using public funds, but the way this thing is still written, it can be canceled tomorrow. We can sign on today, it can be canceled tomorrow. The public has, it says it's gonna be a public park, but it says, as long as this is in existence, well, if it ceases tomorrow, we've spent $25,000 of public funds and the public gets no benefit. I wanna see some period of time that the public has a guarantee that they're gonna be able to use this project. And until I see that, I'm gonna vote against it.
Okay.
That's my objection.
On I'll address it a little bit, and I'll see if Ken can come up and address it a little bit further. The reason I wrote that is that way, is that it was for perpetuity as long as that public park was there. And so, you know, my thought process is we have no control over if that church goes under and they lose all their assets, then the park's gone. So that was my only thinking, but if Ken can come up and give you some assurance and give us 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years to throw in here, I have no problem with that. So,
Yeah,
Ken?
and like I say, I need some time period, otherwise, you understand my
Yeah,
objection
I understand,
is-
but I wrote it that way because, you
Yeah.
know, there was no control over whether that was a church would exist tomorrow.
Well, I understand, but the way you can guarantee it existing is to have it go to a corporation that is separate from the church. And this is a corporation, says it is, that is separate from the church, so it should have its own public existence. So I would assume they can have some financial basis for existing separate and apart.
Yeah, this has been a difficult thing to address all along. It's really hard, you know, I can't see into the future and say for sure. I mean, we're not trying to be dodgy or anything, but it's hard for us to say what guarantees we can make for that.
I understand. I mean, any corporation can go bankrupt.
Right.
Okay, but tell us you're gonna be in existence for 5 or 10 years, and if you go bankrupt, well, so what? Then, then we've lost. But at least we have a guarantee.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that by the time the park gets set up and ready to go, 5 is a good, safe, the church is solid for that amount of time, I can't envision further than that for sure. Like you say, the foundation is separate and it has resources that it would be able to exist even if something did happen to the church, so.
I mean, I drive by it almost every day and I see what progress you're making. I mean, as I said from the beginning, I support the project.
Right.
Don't misunderstand me.
Mm-hmm. What should we do? Can we, I mean, if we put it in 5 years there, does that solve the problem or?
It'll solve my concern.
The life of the park, okay. Used for the life of the park, with minimum 5-year duration. I help with the wording.
Just say not less than 5 years.
Not less than 5 years.
Okay.
Public access and used for the life of the
Another
park.
comment? Would that solve yours?
Section approved.
Yes.
Okay.
I have no problem with that, that's.
Yeah, I was just checking to see if anybody else.
Well, I was just gonna say, like I said last time, the people in my district, does not like the idea that, where everybody talks about separation of church and state. They don't think that the state should be funding a church project, and it's a no matter what. So that's just, that's the way the people.
In your board packet, there are 2 people from your or 3 people from your district who
Yeah, I
have
know,
expressed.
but that's 3 people out of.
Well, I talked to others, but
Yeah, I've talked to others too. I've talked to some that support it, and I talked to some that haven't supported it, and the majority doesn't support it.
Thank you.
Just a comment from me, I guess I believe I agree with Casper here. This is a great project, I think. I think the idea of putting in the time limit is a good fix for that.
So that would need to be a friendly amendment, and Laverne said he was okay with it, and.
We need someone to make that for you.
Okay.
And then, so.
Before we go on to that, that there's no more,
Are we still discussing?
yeah, if there's no more comment from here, we'll open it up to the public.
Are we still gonna get a sign out there stating that?
Oh, yes, it says it in the agreement here.
Okay.
Yeah, at the $25,000 level, that was from the beginning of our fundraising, that
Yep.
put you as a major sponsor.
Yeah, I mean, because that's, that's, as it says here, SDCL 46A 3A 1.1 says what we're gonna do is promote conservation, education, and so forth. That's the whole reason we're contributing to this program.
I just wanted to make sure that,
Yeah, I think it's an exciting opportunity for this organization to raise its visibility and help people see what it does. I mean,
Right,
it's
and
right
that's
there,
why,
yeah.
that's why I support the program or the project, is because that's one of the things we're supposed to do.
That's right.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, like I said in the last meeting, I think this is absolutely what we're supposed to be doing. Absolutely what we're supposed to be doing. But the problem I have with it is giving money to private anything. I don't believe, I think public funds should be used on public projects. And that's why I went with a service agreement on the last meeting, just so they could maintain it, we pay them to maintain it. But this is just $25,000 grant, basically. So.
Okay.
If I can address that.
And I drive by it a lot, and I love the thing. The thing is great.
Well, I think in response to Dan's concern, our sign there is we're paying to educate the public, is what I think our sign is doing by being on that project. We're helping to educate the public as to what this project is doing.
I agree with that, and the other item is, as I developed this agreement that we're gonna have with them, I wrote it in the intent that to give us, every time we grant money, that we have something like this to identify why we're doing it.
Sure.
And it's not only for the public thing, but it's also for innovation, for the best management practice that they're implementing.
Exactly.
It's out there, and that's something we need to do and we need to promote.
Yeah,
So-
it's like we have a small sign out at the Game and Fish Center outdoor campus. We just have a small sign there saying we contributed to that. Hopefully, the Canyon Lake project is gonna have a sign saying we contributed to money to that as well. And I suppose the fly fishers will wanna have a sign saying their name as well. Educating people contributed to this. It wasn't just, the city of Rapid City doing the project.
I think, one way to possibly address your concerns, Dan, is that, it's a way to actually multiply the impact of this organization, by giving even though it's public money, $25,000, you can do something way bigger than that. It's a way to actually expand the impact of tax dollars through a public-private partnership.
Definitely.
And Mr. Chairman, could I ask this gentleman a question?
Yes.
And it's open to the public, right?
Correct.
So
Right.
I think that helps.
But unless there's specifically scheduled activities that take place in the park. Yeah.
So that
So it is
It will
up for the
function as a
public.
public park.
Okay.
What kind of reports will we be receiving on how well it works?
I can't remember what the wording is in there.
A year from the completion of the park, you would come back and give us a report.
And how many years will that will contain the 5 years then that the?
No, just a one-year report, that's all the agreement says.
But if we're going to, if we want some guarantee that it's going to be open to the public for that period of 5 years, then we should have a report every year for 5 years.
I think the report was just on, the intent was the report on 1 year time on the completion of the project, and I think we'll know that it's still in existence there, it's open to the public.
Yeah, but how well it works.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like, if we're going to fund this as a research project, basically, with a grant, that we need to know how well the project succeeded, or if it failed.
Well,
I mean,
it's a demonstration project, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we need a report every so often letting us know how well it's cleaning the water.
This wouldn't take long to drive by and see the mud in the street.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see the trees and we'll see the stuff like that, but how well the filtration system works in it. I mean, I'd like to see a report every year on that for a few years to see exactly.
I think we thought about that, and it's very difficult, because the concept is for stormwater coming in that has sediment in it, it flows into the ground, and then flows into the groundwater. So it's very difficult to take a groundwater sample, assess what's coming in and the groundwater that it's going into, because the ground is actually the filtration. So you really can't get
So we'll never know whether it's a successful project or not.
Well, it's capturing sediment. So that's why it was difficult to come up with a sampling scheme, or we would have, so.
Yeah, it's difficult to quantify. I talked with Galen, isn't it Galen from USGS, about setting up some type of system, and it's hard to do in a space like that. You have to have a place where you can gauge the water coming in, has to drop a certain distance, and then we'd have to have gauges on the stormwater sewer system to see what's going out and what's not going out. And then, like, you can't measure the infiltration. I don't know, maybe you know how to do that. I don't necessarily, but.
But I'm sure the church would be willing for us in 5 years if we want a presentation on the park or an update. You'd be more than willing.
Like 1 year and then at the end of the 5 years? Yeah.
But, I mean, it doesn't have to be in here, but I'm sure that any organization that is doing a best management practice like that would be more than happy.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking to boast how it works, but we want to make sure we have accurate, real information, and instead of just saying, well, what we think is going on.
Is there any questions from the public on this project?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So your church is sponsoring, or you have you have this in a separate, like an LLC or something else that you have the money for this project?
There is a foundation that's a separate nonprofit organization that owns the property and is developing the park. And then the day-to-day management of the park, we're working on a memorandum of understanding with the church to actually, run the park on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know if that answers your question, but the actual park is owned by a foundation.
So is that foundation deciding not to fund it anymore, or is that foundation just for that park?
No, the foundation is the Trinity Lutheran Church Endowment Foundation that's set up to benefit Trinity Lutheran Church.
Okay, how long has that foundation been around?
Since 1976.
Okay, that kind of tells me then, it's
Right.
not just an LLC that you put open and then I would have had to agree with the sir that in 5 years, that would be a bad investment in case something got switched on.
We've got resources, I mean, we're not flush, but we have resources to make sure that things continue for a period
That
of
makes
time.
more sense, just saying that your foundation has been around not just 5 years or 10
Well,
years.
and the church just celebrated its 100th anniversary. So.
I've been down by for about 50, so. Good church, thank you, sir.
Yes.
How many, Deb? How many?
51 on Friday.
Oh. Any other questions from the public? All right, thank you. Hearing none, I think we need to have a friendly amendment to the proposed motion to add the 5 years, not less than 5 years duration.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Get a second on that?
Second.
Second? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
The two
I'm sorry.
opposed are Sandra and Dan. And I said aye.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience in working through that.
Do you plan a grand opening or some type of thing coming up?
Yeah,
Let us
well,
know.
it'll probably be in the spring now, since we're not gonna have it very well underway, or finished for the snowplow.
Yeah, let us know when that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next topic is the USGS gauging stations. Continued support, Joyce Williamson and Mark Anderson.
So this is just, you'll see in your bylaws, or in your packet, a proposal. Every year we fund 2 gauging stations, and so this year our cost is $15,950. So we're just looking for a motion to approve the continued funding of our gauging stations.
I think if everybody remembers that at our last meeting, they came and gave a presentation on all the uses of the gauging stations and all the gauging stations they have, and we're doing too. So I'll, again, to open it up for discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll make the motion.
Motion to approve, okay. And seconded by Director Jasper. Okay, any questions from the board?
Is this an increase from last year? It seems like.
There is a slight increase, yes.
I can answer that if you'd like to.
Yes.
It is a slight increase, it's about 2.8%. Primarily things like that we can't control, gas, because we have to drive to get to, those kinds of things.
I'm sorry, I've been around jet engines too long. I didn't hear a word of that. I apologize.
No apology necessary. So yes, there is a small increase. It's about 2.8%. It's some of those items we can't control, price of gasoline, vehicle cost, those types of things.
Okay.
So it's like, I think it's $440 more than last year.
So it's an inflationary increase.
Yes.
Yeah, no inflation.
Thank you. Any other questions from directors? Any questions or comments from the public? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 0.
No opposed?
All right. Didimo, Dr. Lisa Kunza.
First, before we get that, can we just clarify that the vote on the Trinity Echo Prayer Park there was an amendment and a second to the motion with the amendment, and we voted on the Trinity Echo Prayer Park funding with that amendment. That was not a vote on the
Whole thing?
change, just the friendly amendment. I just wanted to clarify for the record, because there was...
Well, we'll take care of that. We voted on the amendment, the friendly amendment. Now, we'll go back to that Trinity Park and
Oh, I
vote
thought we
on.
were voting on it with the friendly.
With the friendly amendment.
See, that's how, right, that was my understanding, that we are voting on that.
Okay,
So
we're good.
So we're,
That works, doesn't it?
I think that is the way the motion was stated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
just
Okay.
want to make,
As long as that friendly amendment was put in there.
right. So for the record, we are voting.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
So Didimo, Dr. Lisa Kunza, or are you going to run with that?
So, Didimo, we had Lisa, Dr. Kunza did give a presentation last April. And then last month, we had in the board packet that there was a proposal, a request for sponsorship of funding. And Dr. Kunza is here to talk about that if you have any questions. But you'll see that the funding request is for $29,000. And so Dr. Kunza is right there, sorry, Lisa, is here to answer any questions.
Would you be so kind to come up and just give us a quick review on
Yeah, I
what
actually
you...
made a little short presentation because I know a lot of people didn't.
That would be great. That would
Oh,
be
and
great.
I'm sorry, I shut that off, so
It's real brief, I promise.
No, that's great.
You guys are here.
Appreciate it.
Pretty late today.
So it's set up like 2 screens, so you have to drag it off the right to show up up there.
Okay. I can get it.
Request or something. No, the actual funding request, the numbers,
No,
not found it yet.
just this little
Probably
letter.
because it hasn't been approved.
So we put those down in her, it's not in here either.
So it would be something new. So, yeah.
Is it coming up?
It's right here.
What is the number? I didn't get that.
Yeah.
Oh, what's on the back side of that? Letter, did you get the letter?
No, I didn't get that. So.
No, the funding is right here.
It says east
After that.
I didn't get
Dakota
that.
Water.
I missed several, I was missing a few things. So that's just-
I'm sorry, I gave you the,
That's okay. I'll look on the phone here.
Well,
no, I wanted to have this.
I got this,
Oh,
but I don't have
Here.
that, which is.
Here,
okay.
here, here, yes.
On the bottom.
How do you click
See
on
the
it?
33%?
Oh.
I don't see where I can click on it.
Okay, there it is, yes.
I just want to start the slideshow.
You kind of put your letter backwards.
That's, you're speaking on that, the next thing.
I'm very glad.
Did you go off the right side?
So it needs to be on this, and then it needs to be at the beginning. Okay. So if we go down to the bottom, that to the right, two, there, yeah. I don't know how you're seeing that. That's fabulous. That's exactly what I need.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so the last time I was here, I gave kind of an overview of some of the research. I don't really know which direction I should face. I gave kind of an overview of the research that I'm trying to get going on Rapid Creek relative to Didymo, and I was required to give a presentation for another portion to get approval from DENR for permit, sort of. But what I'm here today to talk to you about is looking at benthic macroinvertebrate resource availability in Rapid Creek. So that, and this particular funding request is associated with a graduate student specifically who's already started his project. And so just a reminder of basic aquatic food webs. On the bottom left there you see a couple different types of algae that tend to hang out in the creeks, along with the benthic macroinvertebrates like the mayflies. And of course, the fish like to eat things like mayflies. Okay, and in Rapid Creek, we can't ignore that. Oh, that didn't show up very well. Ignore that Didymo is one of the dominant players in the bottom of our food web. And Didymo may or may not be a problem for our food web, but we need to look further into that. And so with Russell's thesis, one of the main questions, and that's what I put forth for you guys today to look at, is how does Didymo alter resource availability for benthic macroinvertebrates? So first of all, we're going out there and we're collecting these macroinvertebrates monthly. So when I first started talking to you, I was all excited because the Didymo was thick. And some of you out there might be like, it's not so thick right now, because the creek is up over, or it was up over 200 CFS, and so it flushes and then we have this rebound. But I would argue that that gives us the perfect opportunity with our monthly samples to start looking at how those resources change. Not just with the presence of Didymo, but also just the natural fluctuations in the creek relative to our manipulation of flow levels. And so that's another portion of his thesis, but it didn't make this here today. Okay, so how do you figure out what the resource availability is and the diet selection? Well, macroinvertebrates are going to tend to eat the algae. They're going to eat detritus. They're going to eat plants. They're going to eat fungus. And they're going to eat cyanobacteria in general. And so we are taking the gut contents of these invertebrates and separating out into those groups. And of course, one of the questions that we're asking, since Didymo is in Rapid Creek, and it's still questionable at this point how much of an impact Didymo really has. Is it altering our food, our food webs in the creeks. So on the left you see a macroinvertebrate that has been pulled apart. Okay, so that black portion before it turns kind of yellow is the stomach. And you take the stomach and you end up with the gut contents, kind of looking over here on the right. And so you can see in there that there's some detritus, there's some algae. In this particular bug, there isn't any didymo. But that's another question entirely that nobody knows. If didymo is 100% of the resources and it's not being eaten, it's going to cause a shift in our food web. But nobody's looked at it up until this point. So we split up Rapid Creek into 5 sites. We have one site right below Pactola Dam. We have one site by Placerville. We have another site at Hysiga. We have another site in Dark Canyon that's on private land. And we also have a site that's by the dog park. We started sampling monthly in February. We need funds to continue sampling and continue through with some of the lab processing of his thesis. When we separated Rapid Creek into these sections, we took into account where Game Fish and Parks has their locations where they look for fish. They did not this year because the creek was too high. Otherwise, we would have coordinated further with them on looking at the fish gut contents as well as the macroinvertebrate gut contents. But there's always next summer, right? Hopefully the creek won't be up over 200 the whole time. And along with that, we're also looking at a variety of geological formations that underlie the creek. And so those things are how we decided which sites we were going to choose to do these studies in. And so to look at that resource availability, we are also pulling ceston, those suspended solids that people have been talking about, and taking periphyton samples to see how much is out there and what is available for those invertebrates, but also then how much of what's available is being consumed. Okay? And how does didymo play a role in that? Because again, you can't have the fish without the supporting links in the food web. Okay? And so our request is to please help support this thesis project and keep trying to parse out whether or not didymo really is important to manage for or not. So with that, take any questions.
Questions from the directors?
Yeah, where is graduate student Russell?
He's in class right now. If you'd like to meet him, I'll bring him. He presented at the hydrology conference last spring.
Is he from South Dakota?
He is originally from Detroit, Michigan. I recruited him in. He's worked for the National Park Service for 8 years as a technician and wants to be able to move up.
Is he going to stay in Black Hills?
It's a possibility. I don't know for sure. I'm here.
Question, and as we always, when we get later in the day, my brain gets a little mush, so I was trying to understand your sampling or analyzing the stuff in the stomachs of the invertebrates to see if the percentage of didymo that they're eating, or...
Well, so we could do this study without didymo too, right? Where are the macroinvertebrates getting their resources? Is it primarily from algae? Is it primarily from the detritus? Do they rely on the suspended solid load to get their nutrients and their energy? So didymo is just an additional component, right?
Are you seeing, obviously, and from my knowledge, the didymo seems to be right below Pactola to a certain distance, that you're sampling at different locations throughout the creek, up and down to Canyon Lake. Are you seeing didymo in the invertebrates at a higher percentage up by Pactola as compared to the other locations?
So I want to clarify that Didymo goes all the way to Canyon Lake
Okay.
at times, and I'm not going to confirm whether or not Didymo is in the gut contents yet. The majority of the ones that we've looked at so far are from when they first put up, because we started this project and then the dam released increased flows from 50 CFS to over 200 CFS, and the bugs were just wiped out along with the Didymo mats. And so we were starting to look at the progression of the return of the bugs, and so that has been our focus. But I could definitely get you an answer to that question in a couple months.
Yes, and you can blame the flow on us because they're reducing Pactola so we can do the dam project at Canyon Lake.
Right. I thought that was just the second bump, not the first bump.
Yeah, they've been dumping her.
People have been saying that it is because of the winter storm. That's what they blame it on. They don't blame you. So.
This is a one-year project?
This is his master's thesis, so it's really a 2-year project. I'm asking for a portion of the funding for this project, and to tell you the truth, I came to Rapid City because I wanted to study Rapid Creek. I'm not. This gentleman asked earlier if Russell was from here. I'm not from here, but I love it here, and I intend to stay.
Yeah.
So.
You're asking for money from the people of Pennington County.
Uh-huh.
And if he moves to Detroit, Michigan, what do we gain from that?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to gain recognition in his thesis, in the papers that get published from his thesis. You're going to understand your resources that you have in your streams better.
And then that does what for the taxpayers paying the county? Because we're recognized?
Well, there have been substantial amount of funds put into management of Didymo in this area, and if it doesn't influence the food web, does it matter?
Yeah, it's $30,000.
Well, it
No,
matters.
so I'm asking, like, if we find out that these invertebrates are consuming the Didymo and they're doing just fine, or if we find out that Didymo's there and they're still able to get the resources that they need, that would matter.
Okay.
I think, as far as the management decisions made in the future.
So you're telling me there was no South Dakota resident that is doing any studying in this?
There is, but
So-
not for this
I'm gonna
particular
interject.
project.
That's all I
I'm
asked.
going to interject on the questions. I think what we're looking at is we have a Didymo problem that some people believe a Didymo problem, or a Didymo problem that's impacting our fishery, and the study is focused on studying the Didymo, and I'm not sure, money, it matters who's doing the study and stuff. So I would like to focus the attention on what we're doing for the study and what it's going to gain for us as far as addressing the Didymo. So that's where my question kind of relates back to. I know that you, based upon your other presentations, you've done a lot of study in different locations on Didymo, and is there kind of a master plan, and this is part of that master plan to look at and continue studying Didymo to see if we can come to some type of resolution or solution. I'm not saying based upon your discussions, I don't know everybody else's discussions that fish thinks that Didymo is bad because of the slime and it covers up everything, but you're trying to determine what that is.
Right. It's going to be multiple years worth of research. This is just one portion of one project. I know she asked about whether or not any South Dakota natives. One of my other graduate students that I have full funding for is a South Dakota native and intends to stay in the state and would be great as working for DENR or Game Fish and Parks or any consulting company. And intends to stay. So
basically,
but so I intend to continue to grow my program, and I'm also I'm writing a proposal right now with some collaborators in New York and Tennessee that is going to go to NSF and hopefully continue to fund more projects that I'd be silly not to use Rapid Creek as an example, and I hope to continue to put it out there. I gave a talk on the radio for them when they asked me to. So.
Yes.
Well, on behalf of Black Hills Fly Fishers, well, we would support your effort. We know it's going to be a long-term study. It's been long-term already. We definitely have Didimo to a high degree right now. The high flows, all the neighbors where I live are cleaning their pumps. One cleans them every three days. Didimo, several years ago, it was thought that it was the mat on the bottom that did not allow for the midge hatch. Midges were about the only thing that could get through. The caddis couldn't get through, the stoneflies couldn't get through, and nor the mayflies that you have up there. So we would welcome to see if there's some correlation as to whether they're getting any food value from that. Game Fish and Parks at one time, and Black Hills supported some research. Black Hills Fly Fishers supported some research with Dan James, who was with GF&P and went to State University to study this issue. Why they concluded that in fact the fish had gone down in size because they weren't getting any nutrition from the bug life and had turned to eating some of their own class of fish, the younger fish, to the point that behind my, if Bob Smith was here, he'd confirm this because he was up there quite a little bit, behind my house, why GF&P took samples on a regular basis every year for the last 25 years. And the fish count went from 300 catchable fish, that's a 6-inch or larger fish, in a 100-meter stretch. There was 300 catchable fish in that area, down to, in the years of 2006, 7, and 8, which were dry years, to 7 and 5 and 6 catchable fish. And so we know that there was fish loss. Nowhere else in the United States was that information ever gathered. Nowhere. Rapid Creek was the only place. So this is an important creek. Worldwide, it's important information. And so I think you're at the right place to study it. There's a lot of information started already. From our standpoint, we would welcome whatever you can do in order to continue the process. I know it's expensive, but I think many places why they've decided, well, why study it? We don't have any data that says it's killing any fish. Well, we do on Rapid Creek. And so it's a good study, I think.
Thank you. Somebody else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, isn't this one of the only areas that this has been studied as far as research on Didimo?
No. So Didimo has become more of a problem since the early 2000s. Rapid Creek was one of the first places that it was being studied, but it's becoming more of a problem all across the United States, and not just in the West, but also in the East. It's quite common below dams and lake outlets. It may be that we're altering environmental conditions in those areas that Didimo can benefit from. But the avenue that my lab is taking on this is there are people looking at how to control it, and I've been part of some of those projects, and I really want to know what the impact of it is. Like, why should we care? And should we care because it's altering the fish? I studied a stream in Grand Teton National Park, and actually that's the project that my student is fully funded for. In that study, we looked at a lake outlet that's not altered in any way by human influence as far as flow is concerned. It's a problem. It's still a problem. And so we can use some things like what we've learned from what we're doing in Grand Teton National Park and from Rapid Creek. And I'm also involved with a project in Montana with the Army Corps of Engineers on Libby like below Libby Dam, there's a huge problem with Didymo in a huge river running at 25,000 CFS. And so if we can start making comparisons across all of those spatially and temporally, I think we'll be able to better inform management decisions in the future.
Well, because of our initial research started back in 2000, that's the reason that it's really gotten other areas to look at this also, isn't it?
I think it's showing up in other
A
areas,
lot of
but I
wildlife
agree.
management agencies didn't know anything about it until 2000. And I know that now they're doing more research on it too.
They definitely.
And you look at Rapid Creek, and we are probably one of the most premier urban trout fisheries in the nation. So it's really important to understand the dynamics of that stream so we can move forward and not lose what we can.
I would agree.
Yes, Sam.
Well, I was gonna say, I'm not saying that the project is, I mean, I think it's a good project, I'll be honest with you, because yes, it'll answer a lot of questions on the deal. The question is taxpayers of South Dakota would prefer to spend their tax money on a South Dakotan that's gonna stay in South Dakota over someone else. So in consideration to that, I'm not saying that the project won't be funded, but, you know, to let you know that my constituents would be happy to see South Dakota get the money over someone who may be leaving the state.
I agree with
So-
you, but you need a person in that.
Unfortunately for me, it's not as, I probably could recruit a South Dakota resident, but then I would need funds for the whole program to be able to do that recruitment, and that's a lot more than what I'm asking.
Well, I mean, if they, when you do your selecting, if one applies, you know, in other words, I mean, I'm just for future,
Give them preference
future
in the future.
references, that taxpayers of South Dakota would rather pay for a citizen of South Dakota than someone out of state.
Yeah.
Chuck,
This is just a one-time request for this specific project, right?
Yes,
Okay.
but I will likely ask in the future for other projects, but.
Right, I understand, but I mean, we're not gonna be asked to pay additional for this student for this project.
This will take him through next summer, if it's funded.
And that's when his thesis will be
He
due.
will be finishing in December.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going down the budget here, and it's got travel to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a freshwater science conference. Who's going to that?
I intend to take my entire lab to the Freshwater Science Conference. It's great to share what you find in research with people nationally. That's a national conference. I just put in the request for a special session to specifically talk about Didymo and bring in all of the big players from across the nation into that. And so then that project would be presented in that special session.
South Dakota School of Mines and Technology faculty and administrative cost-based calculations, 22,000. What's that?
Can you point to which part you're talking about? Indirect costs. So this is the total direct cost. And so, and then you can't charge indirect costs on anything related to tuition. And so that leaves that much. And so then the indirect cost is 7,000.
But yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what is.
That's related
faculty and
to,
administrative cost-based calculation.
that is related to making sure that there are lights, facilities to use. It's tacked onto all of the grants. We're required to put it on.
Administrative costs, then.
Yeah, that's pretty standard on.
Well, I know.
Any more questions from the directors? Any more questions from the public? Comments? All right, we have a motion and a second.
We do not have a motion.
I thought we did have a motion.
No, we were
Okay,
just
okay, so we all entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
Jasper to approve, Sandra to second. Any further discussion from the board?
What do we have in our budget for something like this? Where are we standing as far as funds too,
Okay.
for the rest of this year.
If you will look at in your board packet,
Yeah,
right after bill pay,
yeah.
you have your current financial standing, okay?
Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Okay, so right now, you have unobligated funding of $225,000.
Answer your question, Bob?
Yeah, that's counting about 25, well, you gotta take 25 off of that. We just, yeah, so, okay, all right.
I'm sorry, I should have pointed
Yeah.
that out
Okay.
earlier in the meeting.
That'd be 50,000.
All right, anything from the public further? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Yeah.
Abstain?
I'm sorry,
Oh, better do a roll call.
I'd like to do a roll call on that one. please.
Okay, go ahead.
Sawyer,
Abstain?
Akers,
Yes.
Bashara,
Yes, I guess, I'm happy to cover expenses.
Hazenorl,
Yes.
Jasper,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Wilson is absent, Director Richer,
No.
Rogers.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right. Okay, now we're off to new business, so there's no new business, but we've got the manager's report.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether it be new business or not, but Sandra and I were talking about maybe having a TMDL meeting down the creek a ways with the people that actually live there.
On the project.
Yeah, let's do that with items and directors.
Okay.
Just right after the manager's report.
You're gonna need to increase that.
Well, at 5:30.
Okay.
Well, manager's report is really brief. It just lists the meetings that I've attended. I guess the only thing that's really come up is Cedar Gulch 2 has come up again, and as you recall, this was probably a little over a year ago now, where I was providing technical assistance to Cedar Gulch. They are out of EPA compliance for gross alpha and combined radium in their well, and it's a very small homeowner group, like 10 homes are on this system, and the state's been working with them, and so there's still ongoing issues. We're working at trying to actually get them grant funding for engineering services, and simply what the project that we are hoping to do is recase the well. So we're going to shut off the flow into the lower portion of the well and open the well up more in the middle, hoping that we'd have a better source of water. And their neighbors in Cedar Gulch 1 actually have similar issues. They were actually in compliance. They've fallen out of compliance too, but they don't want to work together. And but we think that if we get the water from a different level, that we might actually be good. But we're trying to find engineering funds for that. If we can't get engineering funds, then we'll have to go through the state process to get that. So that's really the only project that I've been working on in our area. I saw that Heisega Meadows is on the next DENR meeting, so I asked Mike Perkovich to send me the issues on Heisega Meadows. They've had a privately owned water system for many years, and it was poorly managed. The homeowners went in several years ago and bought their water system for an outrageous price, and now they're doing system upgrades. And so this is phase one of a multi-phase project, but the bids came in. It's simply that the bids came in over, and so they had to go back to the state to ask for more money. I'm still not getting any response from the technical assistance providers of what other projects are out there. And like I said, I just caught this one, and I called the state on that. So, and I talked about the meeting schedule for 2015, and then also you'll see in your board packets are the minutes from the other entities, Black Hills RC&D and Regional Multiple Use Coalition. At the August meeting for Black Hills Regional Multiple Use Coalition, they did approve a letter of support for the USGS groundwater flow model. So they are supporting us.
Who supported that?
Black Hills Regional Multiple Use Coalition.
Okay.
Thank you. That's always a mouthful. So, and I believe that is really all I have. Nothing.
All right, we have some items from directors. I think I'll start with Dan. You had the first item.
Yeah, the first item I have is I've got a problem with the statement at the top. Mainly because we are servants of the people. And if somebody wants to stand up and make an ass out of themselves, that's their right to do.
It's a right to do, but there's a certain civility that we need to maintain at
And
this
I
meeting.
agree,
And that's why we put the statement in,
And
is
that's why I
to
said
manage
we
that and
should
control that.
probably ask instead of telling people. And we are servants of the people.
Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I sent it to you.
Would want to send that to the entire group, and then we'll put that on as an agenda item to
Sure.
review. I was comfortable with what we had written here, so. You guys got suggestions?
Tutorial, and we work for them.
That is correct.
Not
There's nothing in here that
them
says
work
we
for
don't.
us. So,
Are we gonna hire a sergeant at arms to remove
We
people?
haven't appointed one.
so we need to be very open to the public.
No, we are, and this does not
No, I
close
know we
anything
are.
to the
We're
public.
very-
It states
we're pretty
that we
good.
want civility in
We're
this
good,
meeting,
but
so.
we need to remember that.
Okay.
I did also have a point. The RC&D meeting,
Hold on just a second. Just to finish up on that item, you'll send that to Denise as a recommendation, and we'll send that around to the board, make it a board item if the board so desires to change that. All right, excuse me, sorry about that.
the RC&D meeting on June, I could not make because it was the next day after our meeting. And I had to work. I couldn't get over there that morning. August meeting was held not on the fourth Friday, but on the third Friday of that month. So I missed it, but I got the time and the schedule, and it will be on the fourth Thursday of the month, this month, and I will be attending.
Thank you. You also had an item that you want to discuss about newspaper. Oh,
The newspaper, I think that we can have, just in the classifieds, put an ad that all our minutes can be found on our website, or even just a small, someplace in the paper, referring people to the website for our minutes, so that we do not have to pay the cost of the full publication of the minutes.
I think Denise, there was 2 items on that. One is we could give it to them and just say you can publish it if you want to without paying, but I'll let you follow up on that.
This is obviously something that we need to kind of take to the state level, because the codified law actually is a little bit dated. It says that in one area, it says that we are to mail our minutes to the official paper, and I've never mailed them.
Shame on you.
You know, I mean, and here, so we're kind of getting into semantics, and so, but the thing is, so it's obviously something, a piece of codified law that needs to be cleaned and spruced up. But the other thing about that is that it just says that they will be sent to the papers. It doesn't say that we want them to be published. They just have to be basically made available. And
So-
another portion of South Dakota codified law says that, let me see if I can, hold on just
So I have a question about that while you're doing it.
Okay.
So just because we send them to the paper, is that, I mean, they may or may not publish it, right?
Well, like,
You know, they're not required to.
they're not required to,
You're
and,
paying them.
and actually, we've sent things in before that it's just, not minutes wise, but it's just a notice of a meeting or just
And so they may
a
or may
news
not.
release or whatever saying this information is being sent to you for informational purposes only. Please don't construe this as a request to publish.
Right, but several, a year or two ago, we did by motion, we said we would have it published
We did.
by all 3 papers.
Mhm.
Because to
Right, that's why
meet
that's
codified
happening.
law of having your minutes open to the public.
So you're saying you want to change that?
But we publish them on, we can publish them on the web. We had to do that for a while. We've gotten them used to looking at our meetings and letting them know that we are deal. If we put an ad in the paper for, after every meeting, a small one saying, go to our website for the extensive meeting, or
Well-
minutes. We're still notifying them where the minutes are and where they can find it. So we are publishing them on the
Well,
web
but that, and that's a
a
good point.
notification in the paper.
And maybe codified law needs to address that and just say, do they have to be in the minutes have to be in the paper? Or can we say you can find the minutes of the board meetings here
I'll
or here?
talk to one of our local state senators.
Yeah,
and see
So,
what he has to say.
But, and here's the other one, it just says, the unapproved draft minutes of any public meeting blah, blah, are required to be kept by law, and available for inspection by any person within 10 days. It doesn't say how. And, I mean, I can just put them up at our front desk and they're available within 10 business days. However, this does not apply if an audio or video recording of the meeting is available to the public on the governing body's website within 5 business days. So, and also, I don't know if you noticed on the minutes, I am putting the audio recordings on YouTube now, and there's a link to that on our website, so.
Let's do this, so since there's questions about the legality of it, let's research the legality of what we're required to do, and then come up with 3 options, or options to what we can do. So,
Well-
for our next meeting.
I just think right now that, you know, because I've talked to a couple of different water development districts and a couple other entities, and so I think it's probably best at this time to just keep doing what we're doing, putting them in the paper.
Well, I
And then,
agree, yeah.
I mean, but just know that we are having this dialogue, so it is out there.
And if there's some questionable, we just need concrete what we're required by law, and then options to what we're going to do, and then we'll.
Mr.
we
Chairman,
can act
can
on
we
it.
just put this down for the next meeting?
That's just what I'm doing.
Yep.
So I'm asking her to research it, provide options for us. So,
No, as an agenda item.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And we'll get it resolved once and for all. All right. I'm sorry, your turn, Laverne.
Okay. After talking about all this TMDL and all this on Rapid Creek, I'm wondering if we shouldn't have a informational meeting down the creek a ways for the people that are gonna be, well, I'm thinking the farmers and ranchers, of course, but, and there's a lot of residents down there too. None of them were here today, apparently.
I got just a comment. I'm going to ask Dave to address his thoughts on that as he's building this together, because I think that's part of our package is to, you know, educational, and that would include them. But do you got any thoughts on that, Dave?
No, we've talked about that, and somebody recommended doing a little public meeting in Caputa. That would be a little closer for the landowners that live down there, and I think that'd be a good idea. Generally what we find, just for your information, is private landowners would prefer to meet on their land. Their,
Oh, sure.
you know, it's a little more resources for us to go around and go door to door. Whereas if we're in an urban setting, people are more likely to come to public meetings. But we can do our best to contact them and see how, as many as we can get to come.
Well, that little convenience store down there, that little gas station, that's like, all the locals go there anyway, right?
Oh, they go there to play cards and drink coffee, I think.
Yeah.
I don't go there because I don't live down there, but I know
Yeah,
it's in
but I
my
know it's-
area, so.
Yeah.
That's the place to meet. Because I hear they're all down there playing cards, drinking coffee, eating dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll have Dave work on that. I think there's two pieces to that. I think it's a great idea. The second piece is trying to capture, I'm not sure if we want to try to capture a certain landowners based upon your discussion on potential impacts, or if we just want to try to capture as many as possible. I don't know. I just kind of
Well, I just think that we need to inform them of anything that's going on in their area. Because they don't always pay attention to the minutes in the paper, I'll be honest with you. And they won't be surprised by anything that goes on there, because we've already informed them, so it's not that shock. I mean, the taxpayers in Pennington County have had some really big shocks lately on quite a few different issues throughout, not just the water board, but throughout the county and the city and stuff, with different taxes and different stuff like that. And I don't think we need to spring another thing on them without notification first.
Education point. Are you guys thinking of having our next meeting there, or having just a special
Oh,
outside meeting?
I don't,
I think a
Just
special meeting, that would be just that, where it wouldn't be,
Yeah, I
we
don't
wouldn't have
think-
anything else to discuss except
yeah,
for
I
that.
think just to kind of a get together. I don't think we want to try to have a meeting there.
No, just kind of a
You
heads up.
scare them away with that.
We shall work on that.
Just a heads up.
Well, if you have a get-together and you have enough for a quorum, it's a special
It's a
meeting.
meeting.
Yeah.
We'll have to avoid that.
I think it's got to be a meeting.
It's gotta be, I mean, of all of us there, I mean, we could consider it a meeting, but it would be like an open forum for the community to ask us questions and other people involved in the project questions.
Probably after work, I would think.
Yeah, some evening, I'd say actually probably 7:30 would be the best, because they come in from the fields, eat, and come out.
Very good idea. Very good idea. We'll work on that, and we'll have Dave report back through Denise to everybody on what we get set up.
I've got it. A couple more things and then I'll
Okay.
shut them off. I'd like to see put on the agenda for the next meeting, the discussion of putting out flyers for volunteers for testing the water.
For Dakota Water Watch?
Yes. Flyers, mailers, whatever, let's just have a discussion on it.
Sounds good.
Because I was really shocked when I found out the only one we got is in Hill City. And the board doesn't meet until October, so I won't have an answer on the ambulance service until November's meeting.
With that said, do you want to try to put something together?
Fire together. So, yeah, we can try to put something together, but keep in mind that the sampling season ends in October. So we're coming on the end of it, but yes, it's something that we can get geared
Yeah,
up
but do we
for
can get them trained and
spring.
everything?
Yeah,
and
try to find the lab.
So-
Watch already has some with the flyers.
Yeah, we have
I'll
some.
go down and talk to the Rapid City Fire Chief and see what he's, I mean, they're there 24 hours a day. See if he'd be open to it. Don't have to have a strip search to get in.
Nope, that's a good idea. We'll get that rolling. You had a second item?
Yes, I do. Since we're still printing minutes, I think there's just, yeah, we agreed to put as much information as possible, but when we got, the floor was open to the public comments, and then we got all the public comments, well, you know, can't we just say the floor was open to a public comment, and then period, and then a roll call vote was taken?
If you want to go down the line, I'm comfortable with the way the minutes are written, if you want to see what the other directors feel. I'm okay with how they're written, or how they're being developed. I like the information.
I'd just like to say, you know, one of the things that really helped me when I took on this role is being able to go back and look at Lola Lincoln's minutes and just the amount of institutional knowledge and kind of getting an idea and a feel for the different projects and everything. Having more information in those minutes and kind of the director comments, knowing where the concerns were and everything, really helped shed a lot of light and provided better information. So that's kind of why I'm mimicking those older minutes.
Let's just do a little straw poll on this and get the way your thoughts about the minutes.
The minutes, I actually prefer to have more information so I understand what happened in the meeting. So I like detailed minutes. That's my thought.
I like the detail.
Well, I have no problem as far as the minutes go, though we have agreed on certain things a long time ago and we have not lived up to that agreement. That's my problem.
Denise indicated earlier, we created the policy on how they're written, and that's why we changed. So we actually did change that, how we manage that, so, and improving those policies. I'm all for more of the information. The more information we have, the better, and going back and see what somebody said, where they stand, and you know, it's very helpful.
We have a resolution on record that says we're going to stick merely to the facts, and I guess until we change that, that's what we should do. However, I understand that sometimes having additional information is quite beneficial. But until we change our resolution, we need to stick with it.
I believe we did change the resolution with approving the policy on minutes. We have a policy now on how we're doing the minutes.
It is in the policy.
In the policy.
The question is, what's organic and what's not?
But anyway, that's what overrode the resolution when we approved that. We actually created the policy on how we would write out the minutes. Well, they were in there.
They're in the policy.
Okay.
I'm okay with it. I like a little bit more detail. It gives a little bit more information, so I'm okay with the minutes as they are.
My question is, what's organic and what's not? What's organic and what's an argument? Do we really need to point out to the whole entire world that a flyer was outdated?
If that was the topic.
And paid to do that?
And I think where we got the ability to go through those and check those is go through the minutes, and if we don't agree with something that needs to be in there, that's why we have the approval process and the review of the minutes. So
Yeah,
if there's things that we don't need to be in there, I think it's a legitimate task. So
I'm just looking at the right now, the cost of more words in the paper, the more higher price it is.
Well, a triviality too. You know.
Well, I think we need to put that on the, we have never approved putting our recorded minutes. And we, you know, I'm the one that's been all for that, but we've never approved doing it.
great, let's finish up with the minute discussion.
I agree, I like the minutes like they are. I wish we could not have to publish the whole thing in the paper. We had a shorter amended version to publish in the paper, and we have this for our own self, that's all.
I think we'll have that addressed next meeting.
And that'd be only, yeah, have two versions, one.
All right. Sounds like the majority likes the information. If you want to go back and change the policy, let's take a crack at it. So
Is it going to be an item on next month? Or
Yes.
next-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a point.
Okay.
Do we have a copy of the letter that was sent to the county commissioners?
I don't have it on me, but
I sent Denise an email probably shortly before noon, asking her to bring, she may not have gotten the
I
email.
have it, but I didn't bring it with me.
Well, my reason for asking is I got this letter from was sent to Mr. Rogers, signed by Lindell Peterson, which I assume is in response to the motion I made at the last meeting, asking, I thought, a very specific question, and it appears to me the response, well, it reminds me of when I was in the Air Force quite a few years ago. I had a question to someone who was a superior. The response to my question was, that's a very good question. Do you have any others? And that was the response I received at that time. And this appears to be a similar to response to what my request was at the last meeting. But since I never saw a copy of the letter that went to the commissioners, I don't know what was sent to the commissioners, so I don't know what the request really was that went to them. And I guess I'm curious.
Didn't we distribute that out?
Never came to
My
me.
letter? My letter was very simple and plain, without having it in front of me to ask, but I was
I'd
indicated
have to go back and look.
that we had, the board had identified district manager, board member as the person to represent, sent that to him, and then we indicated that, I indicated in there that Denise is going to the meetings, and that,
You gonna pass them on?
yeah, when I'm done, that Denise is going to the meeting, and that we feel that the spring project is something of interest to this water board, because it's a water board in our district. How would you like to proceed in this matter? That's basically what I asked.
Okay, well, I would like to get a copy of that letter before the next meeting, and we may have to come back and address this again.
Okay. What are your concerns with the response?
It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't answer my question.
It's a question, another question.
I thought it was pretty clear.
Well, that's not my opinion. To me, it's
I'll send it to
gobbledygook.
you.
You can quote me on that.
Okay. We'll create that as an agenda item on the next meeting. We'll get my letter that was sent out to the county commission, send it to everybody in the response. I don't know, is there anything you want to address with that letter? Do we need to, do we want to move forward? And,
I will address it at the next meeting.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, this 319 thing has been a
It has.
hassle.
It has. So.
You know, on how we've
And we're
been
starting
treated
another one.
by, I think, the county commissioners,
Yeah.
you know, as we're irrelevant. And I think that is not the way another political subdivision in this state should treat another political subdivision.
I'll disagree with you on that, but we'll talk about it at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So I totally disagree. So.
Do you disagree we are political subdivision and they are political subdivision? Is that your disagreement?
My agreement coming into disagreement with this whole thing is that they had the 319 project. We had people adamantly against the project, and the going to the county, they pulled the funding. So I'm sitting here as I came onto this board going, well, if we pulled the funding, what are we doing participating in the project? And it was my understanding as I turned chairman that there were people interested on this board in dealing with the project because it was in our district. So I was conflicting. I'm saying if we're not participating funding and we're against it, why are we participating? So my recommendation, and we can go back to the minutes or whatever, was to pull back and pull totally out. But the board wanted to keep somebody there. We tried to send Dan, we sent him to the county commissioner, or sent the request, they denied it. We sent Denise, she participated in it, and then we gave a gag order to Denise to go to a meeting and not represent us. So that to me was, I didn't understand that at all.
Well,
So I was trying to come to a resolution on where we're at, what they wanted. If we want to participate, because it's a water project in our district, then let's participate and let's ask them how they want us to participate. And their response was they would like to have Denise as their participant.
The big thing is the county commission is telling us who we can put on that board.
Right. They don't have that
They
right.
do not have that right to tell that only so-and-so can be on this.
think they do have that
No,
right.
they
They're running
No,
the
they
program.
don't.
They're running the
No,
program.
they don't. We are a state entity. We are
I know we're a state entity, but we're,
over and they are just a county entity.
that is, they're running the 319
They'll be
project.
here next week.
So that's, are they not running
And
the
that
project?
is, that is one of the main reasons we pulled the funding,
I know. Why are we participating?
because they
we are legislatively
kicked us out of the meetings
ordered,
there.
if you will, to do these types of things. It's within the mandate of our duties.
I agree.
So that's what we're trying to do, is fulfill our duties.
If we go even further back into the history, we had the opportunity, I've been told, to run that 319 project, and we decided not to. The county decided to take that project and run with it. So they're running the program.
And just because we did not fund it, there's a lot of people that sit on that board that do not participate in funding either.
I won't argue about the funding. My perception was we pulled the funding. If we want to participate, we participate under how they want us to participate because they're running the program. And that's how I see it. I don't know how else you could look at it.
We also said that we may resume the funding if they would be a little more
Said in the
cooperative.
meeting
But,
was-
they
I feel we should fund some project under
It's,
that.
what was said in the meeting was we would extend our funding again if they would start allowing public comments. That was the big one. They wouldn't allow, they still don't allow public comment. And that's why we pulled the funding
when we
slammed it
literally
pretty
got
hard.
kicked, I sat up there at the meeting and they literally had a sheriff there and kicked everybody out of the meeting. Except for the people that sat right there at the table.
And that's they're running the
And,
show. I'll say it again. Sandra, I'll say it
but
again.
we
Let me
were-
finish, please. Let me
Let's
finish.
call a question.
There's no
Discussion.
question.
We'll leave it there.
Minutes on the agenda for
Yeah.
next meeting.
Well,
It's on
okay,
there.
I'll resume there, but
Defer to the next meeting.
we shall do that. We can defer to the next meeting. All right, other items from directors?
Slipper came around here. What is it?
I just passed a little flyer around, just for you guys' information to look at. I'm gonna bring it up in January.
All right. Any other items from directors? I just had one comment on the Rapid Creek project. Keep that in mind and, try to do a little investigation on your own part. Go check the TMDL out, check the information out. Call Dave up, talk with Dave about the project. I think it's something very worthwhile for our district to jump in and deal with. I'd intended, and I'll probably do it at the November meeting, I'd like to send out a sheet of paper with some ideas with people on how we want to move forward on projects that we want to tackle. And this will be one of those projects, and kind of help us with our strategic plan on what we're doing as we move forward, on projects coming, because this 319 Rapid Creek project will have a lot of projects and have a lot of things for us to look at and deal with. So we'll have to keep that in the back of your mind. Keep other projects, the Water Watch, if we want to beef that up. If there's other items we want to dive into. So I think we need to kind of come up with a little plan as we move forward on what we want to attack and approach. And I think this will be one of them.
We're starting projects where we're being visible and we're showing the community that we're doing something, not just meeting everybody.
No, definitely, we need projects. Items from the public? We thinned out the project, okay. We thinned out the public.
We outlasted them.
All right, entertain a motion.
I believe Laverne's making a motion.
Motion.
We all said
That's a
so.
real
Second,
motion.
everybody
Second, I'll second.
Are you suggesting that we get?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? It passed.